All right, we are calling the meeting to order. The NVUSD Board of Education is holding a regular virtual board meeting tonight that all can participate in remotely. You can join via Zoom. Specific directions on how to participate are located on the Board of Education webpage on the district's website, nvusd.org/board. The open session part of the meeting agenda begins at 7 p.m. We're moving on to public comment on closed session items. Before going into closed session, the board is available for public comment on closed session agenda items. Is there any public comment on closed session items, Mr. Bassinet?
There's no public comment for this item.
Thank you. Seeing that there are none, the Napa Valley Unified School District will now adjourn into close. See you all back at 7 p.m. Thank you. Okay, good evening. We are reconvening to open session. Good evening. My name is Elba Gonzalez Mares, and this is the Napa Valley Unified School District Board of Education. The NVUSD Board of Education is holding a regular board meeting tonight that all can participate remotely. You can join via Zoom. Buenas noches, mi nombre es Elba González Mares y esta es la Mesa de Educación del Distrito Escolar Unificado del Valle de Napa, NVUSD por sus siglas en inglés. La Mesa de Educación de NVUSD está llevando a cabo una reunión regular esta noche en la que todos pueden participar de forma remota. Puede unirse a través de Zoom. Interpretation in Spanish is available for tonight's virtual board meeting. To access interpretation from a computer, click on the interpretation icon on the bottom of your screen from within the Zoom application. On a mobile device, click on the More button on the bottom of your screen and choose Language Interpretation from within the Zoom application. This is a separate channel that will allow you to hear English to Spanish translation concurrently. Please note, interpretation services are not available when you join our meeting by calling in. Our interpreters for tonight's meeting are Isidra Mencos and Claudia Lindgren. May we have one of the interpreters please translate these directions on our English channel so our Spanish-speaking families can hear the instructions.
Buenas tardes o buenas noches. Esta noche tenemos servicios de interpretación disponibles en el español. Ustedes pueden escoger este servicio de interpretación si están en la computadora, mirando la parte de abajo de la pantalla de Zoom y escogiendo el icono del globo terráqueo, y al hacer clic allá van a poder escoger el idioma español o inglés, lo que necesiten. Si ustedes están accediendo a la reunión por teléfono, pueden hacer clic en el botón que dice More o Más y entonces escoger los servicios de interpretación en español. Si ustedes están accediendo a la reunión por teléfono, no hay servicios de interpretación en el teléfono. Gracias.
Gracias. Specific instructions on how to participate in the meeting are located on the Board of Education webpage on the district's website, nvusd.org/board. Can we please start with an attendance roll call from Vera Morales, Executive Assistant?
Yes, student board member,
Present.
trustee Gonzalez Mares,
Present.
trustee Jankowicz,
Present.
trustee Gracia,
Present.
trustee Reiser,
Present.
trustee Water,
Present.
trustee Shu,
Present.
trustee Dooley,
Present.
quorum present. Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. Thank you for joining us tonight for our Napa Valley Unified School District Board meeting. Public participation remains virtual, online only. This meeting tonight is in accordance with the open meeting rules in the state of California for the governor's order. On June 11, 2021, the governor issued Executive Order N0821, which expressly extends the flexibility concerning the conduct of public meetings through September 30, 2021. Okay. Thus, NVUSD will continue to conduct our public meetings online through September 30th. As trustees, we have returned to the boardroom. However, in order to ensure access to our meetings without any limitations, we are holding meetings online with remote access via Zoom for the public and guests. I'm going to start tonight with some basic instructions on how we are going to be using Zoom and involve the members of the community. All board of trustees and the superintendent are in video throughout the entire board meeting from here in the boardroom. Other staff members are present by video. Members of the community will not be on video and will be muted except during public comment. During public comment, any member of the community that wishes to speak must raise their hand using the raise hand feature in Zoom. You will be unmuted and will be provided 3 minutes to speak. There are 2 ways to make public comment within the time allotted for public comment on an eligible agenda item. The comment by video conference. Click the raise your hand button to request to speak when public comment is being taken on the eligible agenda item. When it is your turn to speak, your name will be called out. You will then be unmuted during your turn and allowed to make public comments. After the allotted time, you will then be remuted. Instructions on how to raise your hand are available on the district's website at nvusd.org/board. To comment by phone, you will be prompted to raise your hand by pressing *9 to request to speak when public comment is being taken on the eligible agenda item. When it is your turn to speak, the last 4 digits of your phone number will be called out. You will then be unmuted during your turn and allowed to make public comments. After the allotted time, you will then be remuted. Instructions on how to raise your hand by phone are available on the district's website at nvusd.org/board. In addition, community members were allowed to submit comments via email at publiccomment@nvusd.org up until 8 a.m. this morning. For every agenda item, I will prompt the meeting participants who have joined us via Zoom for public comment. Please follow the instructions just provided when you would like to comment on an item. All right, so we are now on to our next item, which is okay, we might have a series of technical difficulties today, but we'll get through it. Okay, where was I? Okay, now I will ask Trustee Gracia if we need to report on closed session items.
Yes, we had D1, student discipline. With respect to every item of business to be discussed in closed session pursuant to Ed Code 35146 and 48912:20, Government Code Section 49060 and 49078, and the Family Rights and Privacy Act, student matters. The vote will be a roll call vote for each student in open session. The board D1, C1, the board recommends for the readmission for student 090-22021. Move to approve.
Second.
We have a first and a second. Vera, if you could take roll call.
Yes. Trustee Gonzalez Mares,
Aye.
Trustee Jankowicz,
Aye.
Trustee Gracia,
Aye.
Trustee Ricer,
Aye.
Trustee Water,
Aye.
Trustee Shu,
Aye.
Trustee Dooley.
Aye.
Thank you.
Any other items? That concludes your report, Trustee Gracia.
That concludes my report.
Great, thank you. All right, item E2, flag salute. I think if I recall, it was going down the line over here, so I'm going to ask now Trustee Chu to lead us on the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We are now going to go into announcement. This meeting is live streamed and recorded via Zoom and will be archived on the district YouTube channel. For a detailed review of any meeting agenda item, the archive video can be referenced and located on the district's webpage at nvusd.org. The public can join the virtual board meeting remotely via Zoom. Participation instructions and the process for public comment can be found on the district webpage. We now move to our next item, which is approval of agenda.
Move to approve.
Second.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Water. Student board rep,
Aye.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose or abstain? Thank you. We now move to item E5, approval of minutes. This is the approval of minutes of August 19, 2021.
Move to approve.
Second.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Water. Student board rep,
Aye.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Abstain or oppose? Thank you. We're now going to item E6. Superintendent, Dr. Massetti, if you could let us know who can we recognize today, visitors and employee organizations?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Can everyone hear me? I see Ms. Gail Young, President of NVEA, is here this evening. Mr. Bassinet, can you please unmute her?
This is Gail Young. I'm president of Napa Valley Unified, or president of Napa Valley Educators Association, that represents all the teachers, nurses, and counselors in the Napa Valley Unified School District. We've had quite a start to a year that we were so hoping would be super easy. It will be, I'm hoping for, I have optimistic, sunny thoughts for the whole thing. And I hope that you'll hear from me later on this evening as other things are discussed. But I think we've got some good, exciting news as we go forward. And I think that's really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young, for being here tonight. Next, we have President Ms. Leslie Walder, President of NAPS. Are you there, Ms. Walder?
Good evening, Dr. Musetti, President Gonzalez Mares, members of the Board of Trustees, student representative. I'm Leslie Walder. I'm the president of the Napa Association of Pupil Services, one of our bargaining units for the district. I want to join this evening with an expression or several expressions of gratitude. I'm grateful to be back at work at school sites with students. I'm grateful for a district that recognizes the importance of social emotional learning and has put money and resources towards school-based social emotional learning programs, and has again committed to hiring social workers to meet the needs of our many students. Finally, I think I want to express gratitude for the district in honoring and recognizing its employees and the work that they have put in, as we look forward to recognizing and acknowledging our employees and our members in this very difficult and challenging year. Thank you, Dr. Musetti, and thank you, Dr. Members of the board. And I yield my will now. Hold my hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Walder, for your presence here this evening. And we have Mr. Hector Gallegos, President of CSEA.
Good evening, everybody. Hector Gallegos, representing CSEA classified staff. Just glad to be back and want everybody to know that classified is ready for this, what is to come. And so yes, very grateful to be able to see students back somewhat normal and looking forward to what's to come. Good evening, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Gallegos, for being here. I want to thank our 3 union leaders for their presence at tonight's board meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Massetti. We now move to our next items of the agenda, recognition of students of the month. Tonight we have American Canyon High School and Napa High School, but we will start with American Canyon High School.
Good evening, Dr. Musetti and NVUSD Board of Trustees. I'm Crystal Lopez. I'm the principal at American Canyon High School, and I'm very privileged to be here again to have this opportunity to recognize some of our exceptional American Canyon High School students. So thank you. Our first student of the month for September is Marcus Texan. His guidance counselor, Miss Liliana Zemed, nominated him for Student of the Month. And here's what she had to say. In Marcus, you will find not only an exceptionally bright and driven young man, but also a young man of unusual depth, authenticity, and passion for life. Marcus has a confident yet gentle poise about him. The way he communicates is both sophisticated and thoughtful, and the humanism and sincerity of purpose in both his academic pursuits and leadership style demonstrates wisdom well beyond his 17 years. Accordingly, for those who know Marcus, it comes as no surprise that besides currently holding the #1 ranking of his graduating class at American Canyon High School with a 4.4 GPA, he also has completed 54 Napa Valley College units with an A- average and is enrolled in 7 additional units this semester. For reference, at the conclusion of this semester, he will have completed over 2 full years of college while also being the top student at American Canyon High School. At ACHS, Marcus has served as a student tutor to both high school and middle school students, been a member of the Mu Alpha Theta Honor Society, was the lead volunteer for the UC Davis College Readiness Academy during its last summer, acted as the president of the ACHS Filipino American Cultural Club, and was hired as the media and public relations intern at K-Hope International, during which he made significant contributions toward increasing education and outreach about the needs of families in both our local and international community. If that doesn't impress you, Marcus has also served in a number of leadership positions as a dual enrolled ACHS NVC student, including Vice President of Community Service for Phi Theta Kappa, Beta Beta Sigma, Senator at Large, and more recently, President of the Associated Students of Napa Valley College. As far back as they can remember, NVC has never had a high school student in one of its most prestigious and important positions that any Napa Valley College student can hold. As president, he oversees the ASNVC's board operations, ensures legal and policy compliance, reviews college policies, and addresses student issues and challenges to such policies at meetings with the NVC Board of Trustees. Most importantly, however, he is responsible for cultivating an environment of respect, professionalism, and critical thinking for all NVC students, something he also does every day as a student at ACHS. Marcus represents everything we hope to instill and nurture in all American Canyon High School students. His energy to do good in the world and natural leadership abilities are both admirable and humbling, and he certainly deserves to be recognized and celebrated as our Student of the Month for September. So congratulations, Marcus. All right, Marcus, you may go ahead.
Thank you. Good evening, trustees, Dr. Musetti, distinguished district administrators, and the district community. I would like to first and foremost thank you all for this opportunity to speak and reflect on this tremendous journey. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank my counselor, Ms. Ahmed, for the nomination and guidance over the past 4 years. Mr. Butler, choir director at American Canyon High School, not only for his energy and effort throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, but also for his love for music and his passion for teaching and interacting with students throughout my time at ACHS. And lastly, Mrs. Romero, a chemistry teacher at ACHS, for helping me explore chemistry and build my passion for STEM. I would also like to send a shout out to my parents, siblings, and friends for their continued support, laughter, and escape from school, even through these challenging times when connectedness seems non-existent. As many of you have just learned, not only do I participate in several high school activities, but I also wear many hats at Napa Valley College, including serving as the ASB president, advocating for college students and high school students alike, and also being a dual enrolled student. At American Canyon High School, diversity and inclusivity roam each building, allowing each student to express their interests, setting up students for success academically and socially. This environment has allowed me to discover my passions. ACHS has allowed me to build my confidence and apply acquired skills while applying to colleges, including several UCs and a handful of private universities, exploring majors emphasizing the sciences or health occupations. All these passions can be traced back to what I learned from ACHS and the moments I have been that I have experienced. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcus. Our next student of the month for October is Ishi Sabarito, and Ms. Samed has this to say about Ishi. Ishi is a young woman of authenticity, empathy, and courage who is driven to make meaningful, positive change in every aspect of her life and possesses an intellectual curiosity that significantly stands out amongst her peer group. Though everything that Ishi does is impressive, one of her most significant contributions to American Canyon High School students is founding and serving as the president of the Active Minds Club, where she leads a small group of passionate students who develop effective strategies to increase awareness about mental illness, provide resources, inspire action, and reduce stigma and discrimination through open dialogue and inclusiveness. The presence and activism of the Active Minds Club was invaluable during the last year and a half, and the healing and supportive impact she and the other officers had on the lives of many of our struggling students was significant. Ishi's pursuit to help others does not stop at mental health. She also has the desire to instill her lifelong passion of learning in children. Ishi currently serves as a math tutor in the Board of Boredom organization and is an assistant catechist in her church's religious education program. Ishi has a deep understanding that building a relationship with each of the young people that she helps is equally as important as the academic guidance she provides. Her mentorship is rooted in creating a learning environment that encourages their growth and stimulates their creativity. And her ultimate goal is to teach her students to become problem solvers, critical thinkers, and good citizens. Ishi also serves as vice president of the American Canyon High School Women in STEM Club, where she and her peers engage in critical thinking, real-world coding, and competitions, as well as act as mentors to young women in the middle school in order to inspire them to become future leaders in the STEM field. Furthermore, she is a member of the National Honor Society and the Mathematics Honor Society Mu Alpha Theta. In addition, Ishi is a member of the award-winning ACHS choir and has played on the JV and varsity soccer team since she was in the 9th grade. Ishi exemplifies what American Canyon High School stands for. She has the strength of spirit to meet any challenge, the grace and eagerness to change the lives of others, and the intellectual ability to be a leader and agent of positive change in any of her future endeavors. We are honored to choose her as our student of the month for October. Welcome, Ishi.
Thank you, Mrs. Lopez. I'm incredibly honored to be recognized as Student of the Month. I hold so much passion for everything I do, but my accomplishments wouldn't have been possible without the overwhelming support I've received at home, school, and within my community. Over the past year, I've had the opportunity to work with so many amazing adults, both on the ACHS campus and throughout the district, who are just as passionate as I am about changing the conversation around mental health in high schools. I want to acknowledge Mrs. Harris, the leadership teacher at ACHS, and the Wellness Center for all the amazing work they've done with me to help support my mission to raise mental health awareness on campus. I especially want to thank my counselor, Ms. Ahmed. In the past year, she's become an incredibly important figure in my life, and it's because of her unconditional support that I've made so much progress in my mission. There is still so much work to do to provide a safe space for students to feel seen, heard, and supported at ACHS and throughout Napa County. But I'm eager to continue this work alongside all the incredible people I've met along the way. I'm grateful for everyone at ACHS who has provided me an uplifting environment for me to continue to grow as a student, leader, and advocate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Principal Lopez, and our students of the month of American Canyon High School. And here comes a round of applause.
Go Wolves.
Huh?
Go Wolves.
Really? Makes me want to go back to school now and get more credits of my college career. But thank you both so much. It's definitely helps us and get inspired here and set the tone of the work that we get to do tonight. So now we will continue with Napa High School.
All right. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Dr. Ainsworth, principal of Napa High School. Thank you, Dr. Musetti, President Gonzalez-Maras, and the NVUSD Board of Trustees for the opportunity to celebrate two of our great, amazing Napa High students tonight. In what has been a challenging year and a half for our students, the two students that we're honoring tonight have risen to the challenge and have demonstrated an incredible resiliency. They represent the best and the unique character, involvement, and all-around awesomeness that our Napa High students have come to be identified by the larger Napa Valley community. It's my joy and honor tonight to present to you these two great Napa High seniors, Dalila Tapia Padilla and Alondra Garcia Cifuentes, as our students of the month. And we'll go ahead and have Alondra Garcia Cifuentes. If she can come on. She was nominated by Miss Profit, our English teacher. She's heavily involved in AVID, several AP honors classes, and other things, and I'll allow her to speak for herself. So Alondra.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Ainsworth. Hi, I'm Alondra, and this is my mom, Maria Garcia. So, okay, I'll start now. Ever since I can remember, education has always held a high significance for my family. Growing up in a Mexican household, my older siblings and I were taught to always strive for academic success. We were raised with this mindset because our parents were not able to make it past sixth grade, as their small town in Mexico didn't even have a middle school. Even though my parents did not fully understand American schooling systems at the beginning, they have always made sure to give us the utmost support because they knew it would allow us to succeed. And if it weren't for the teachers, mentors, and programs I've met and been a part of during my time here at the district, I would not have been able to make my family proud by currently being on the path to apply to college. I entered the NVUSD in 2009 at Snow School Elementary School, and I remember being over the moon to start school. And I remember that day I wore a teal shirt and black pants and sneakers that lit up with every step I took. I remember choosing those shoes the day before and being so excited to show everybody the next day. But when I got there, I was met with an unpleasant surprise as a few kids looked down at my feet and started pointing. And as soon as they opened their mouths, I couldn't understand anything that they were saying. I didn't understand anything that they were saying because they were speaking in English and I only knew Spanish. The first few years of my academic career consisted of many interactions like that where people would talk to me and I was not able to respond. But luckily that changed as I was able to take ELD courses at my elementary school. And then it was pretty much smooth sailing. And then I went off to middle school. Looking back, my time at Harvest Middle School truly means a lot to me because it was a time where I was able to become college bound, as they say, because I joined AVID. And during that time, I was able to tour campuses and really learn about what college is really like. And luckily, I continued being a part of that when I started high school. During my time at Napa High, I've participated in a handful of programs and I've been in AVID all 4 years and I've taken advanced and honors courses in English, math, and Spanish. And I'm currently pursuing my seal of biliteracy in Spanish. As a Napa High student, I've also been able to give back to my community by being a part of a few clubs, and one of which was Key Club, where I was a president last year during the pandemic. And this year I am the vice president. But my accomplishments over the years would not have been possible if it weren't for some of my teachers, such as my kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Hill, who helped my first generation family navigate the American schooling system, and my Harvest AVID teacher, Mrs. Pridey, who helped me first learn about college. And then at Napa High, I want to thank my Math 1 teacher, Mr. Yu, for always being understanding and always welcoming me with open doors. And then I also want to thank my English teacher, who was also the Key Club advisor, Ms. Profit, for nominating me for Student of the Month, as well as always being such a kind person. And lastly, I want to thank my AVID teacher, Mrs. Calderon, for preparing me for what life as an adult will entail. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and it's an honor to represent you all.
All right, thank you, Alondra. Our next student of the month is Dalila Tapia Padilla. And I think the best part of getting to honor Dalila tonight is, well, just over 3 years ago, my first day, I showed up at Napa High as an assistant principal, and she was one of the first people with a group of friends that met me right by the same tree that we have met almost every morning for the last 3.5 years. And so this one is pretty great to honor her tonight and say great job and welcome her. So Dalila, why don't you go ahead and share your story?
Thank you, Dr. Ainsworth. I want to begin by thanking my family for being here today. And I would also like to thank Mrs. Gassner, who nominated me for this award. Today I want to tell a story of a time that definitely helped me become who I am today, not only as a student, but also as a person. In elementary school, around 2nd and 3rd grade, I wasn't the most attentive student. Whenever I was at a group table, my teachers would have to move me because I was always talking to my classmates. As a result, I was moved to a single table where I was all by myself. However, I would still find a way to talk to other students in the class. Eventually, my teachers decided to allow me to go to other classes and help the younger kids with their reading or simply helping them clean up after themselves. They helped me redirect my outgoing personality into a more productive role for the classroom. I don't think I realized it then, but I loved being a leader and working with younger kids, and to this day, I still enjoy it. Softball has also been a big part of my life. I have played travel softball for the past 7 years, and the time and commitment that this takes has helped to make me a more dedicated student. I am currently trying to further my softball career and play at the collegiate level. The skills that I've learned through leadership have helped me to confidently reach out to coaches to help fulfill this dream. As a leadership student on the Napa High campus, I have had the honor of being sophomore and junior class president, and now in my senior year, ASB president. All of these experiences have definitely impacted my decision of wanting to work in the medical field, specifically with kids and helping out my community as much as possible. Lastly, I want to thank all my teachers that helped me to get where I am, and my parents who have supported me throughout my educational journey, and I look forward to what lies ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalila.
Thank you to our Napa High Students of the Month and Principal.
Go Grizzlies.
Yeah, really, it's a great way to highlight our programs too. That kind of complements everything that we do, so appreciate those stories. So thank you. All right, now we're moving on to our next item of our agenda. And this is our public comments on non-agenda items. Members of the audience may address the board on any school-related matter that is not on the agenda. The board will not take action on any issue raised during this section of the agenda inasmuch as board action is limited to posted agenda items. Speakers are requested to limit their comments to a maximum of 3 minutes. Prior to doing that, I'm going to ask Trustee Gracia to please read the public comment received on non-agenda items via email.
Yes. No public comments on non-agenda items were submitted via email at publiccomment@nvusd.org before the board meeting.
Thank you, Trustee Gracia. Okay, so let's start with any speakers tonight, Mr. Bassinet.
We did, and yes, we do have public comment. I'll go ahead and allow Sylvia.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, go ahead.
Wanted to make sure. Good evening, Superintendent Musetti and members of the Board of Trustees. My name is Sylvia Regalado Zaclad, and I'm a parent of students at Canyon Oaks Elementary and American Canyon Middle School. And tonight, I just wanted to share with you some thoughts. We recently underwent part of the procedures that are in place for COVID symptoms with our family. And I wanted to give some feedback and ask for considerations with regards to looking at making some revisions to the current procedures mitigating the spread of COVID-19 and its variants among our elementary school campuses specifically. I would like to see greater emphasis given to proper mask usage on campuses. I've witnessed students, teachers, parents with masks below the noses and without masks in highly trafficked areas. In fact, in the district's own videos and pictures celebrating the return to school, some of that same poor mask usage is present. I would also like some consideration for testing for COVID to be implemented as part of those mitigating procedures at our campuses, the way that other districts in the greater San Francisco Bay Area have done. And lastly, again, coming back to my recent experience with this, the one system diagnosis that's being used right now at schools is really not, without greater inquiry, is really not beneficial to mitigating COVID. My daughter was taken out of school because she had a tummy ache after she ate something for snack. I've been diligent in making sure that I'm checking temperatures and we're getting weekly COVID testing. But nonetheless, putting myself in the place of other parents, I went and picked up my daughter and noticed that my son, who is in the same household, was not asked to leave campus because he presented no symptoms. And so there's a disconnect there. We, were told about the procedure to have a negative test returned with my student, with our daughter, in order for her to come back to school. However, that wasn't extended to my son. And again, the concern comes about, if we had a positive test, how does that impact other families? And so I'd like for some consideration to be given for weekly testing, maybe even checking temperatures at campuses, and then also giving better data for families to be able to track and see how they can help to mitigate the COVID spread amongst our schools and communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next speaker.
Next speaker is with the phone number 624-5605. Go ahead, you can talk.
We don't hear anything, Mr. Bassinet. Next speaker, then we can come back.
That is all for public comment.
Okay, I'm maybe giving one more last chance to that phone number. Okay, great. Sounds good. Thank you, Mr. Bassinet. That is all for public comment. We will now move to item H of our agenda, which is reports. This is item H1, which is Board of Education and Student Board Representative reports. Would you like to start our Student Board Red, Emily? Go ahead.
So on August 27th, I was interviewed by the American Canyon Community and Parks Foundation for their newest Fund and Need project. They're hoping to build a new Recology Center in the wetlands area of American Canyon. And they'll be playing that video that I was briefly filmed for at their annual Evening at the Ruins dinner event next Saturday, if anyone is interested in attending or learning more about that. On September 7th, Schools for Climate Action made public comments to American Canyon City Council as they're voting whether to make an amendment to the city's general plan to include climate change. Eventually, the amendment was passed unanimously, and this now opens up the opportunity for permanent action. I did want to mention that from the first day of school to present time, I've had many students approach me with concerns and inquiries about COVID-19 and the steps that are being taken to prevent contact spread on campuses. Many expressed that they were hesitant to return because just the risk factor that comes along with being around large groups of people for extended period of time. Now, I'm unsure of how many high school campuses within our district have a closed campus mandate, but I do know that my own school, American Canyon, implemented a closed campus rule a few years ago that hasn't seemed to budge. And in some of the discussions that I participated in or listened into, students from American Canyon are suggesting that all campuses be reopened, and this looks different at each site, but really the main idea is allowing students to go off campus during lunches and free periods and other breaks, because really the main concern is in regards to the massive crowds that have been forming in cafeterias, buildings, and quads, where we take off our masks to eat or get like a breath of fresh air. And I do know that this issue is one that should be taken up with the administrations of each school. So I'm currently supporting some of my peers who are hoping to form a committee to potentially work out these issues with our admin. But I did think that it would be interesting to share today. This month, I wasn't really able to connect with as many different sites and students as I would have liked to, or branch out to many different projects, but I do have some plans in the near future. Most recently, I've been working with a representative from Regeneration Napa County. This is a program that allows participants to track and record their carbon footprint, amongst other things. It's a really useful tool. In attempts to get the program into classrooms, I've been helping the coordinators organize an inter-school challenge where all NVUSD high school students are invited to participate. We're currently working with teachers and students from Napa High, American Canyon High, New Tech High, and Valley Oak High Schools. The details have yet to be finalized, but we hope that this becomes an event that really connects our different sites, especially during this different time. And I also wanted to add that I did get to see Trustee Chu at the September 2nd back to school night, but that concludes my report for today.
Thank you. I'd like to start, Trustee Gracia.
Sure. On the 24th of August, I met with a representative from Senator Dodd's office. We discussed AB 438, and I talked about some of the details that would be more difficult for our school district to comply with. On the 24th, I also attended the 7-Eleven committee meeting. On the 25th, I attended the curriculum committee meeting. On the 31st, I visited the old Stonebridge campus to get a better understanding of that property, considering that we may be asked to dispose of it. On the 31st, I also attended the name advisory committee meeting for our new dual language academy. On September 3rd, I attended the Vintage High School home opener at Memorial Stadium. It was a rough outing for both JV and varsity, who both lost to El Cerrito. On the 8th, I attended the Vintage High School Parent Club meeting. And then on the 9th, I visited New Technology High School, where I got to tour the campus and see them prepare for their club day.
Thank you, Trustee Garcia.
I too attended the 7-Eleven board advisory meeting on the 24th and on the 31st, the Citizen Advisory Committee meeting. I too watched a little football and then attended the 7-Eleven board advisory meeting number 3 on the 7th. And then on the 8th, attended the Finance Board Advisory Committee meeting, which I will report on later in the evening.
Thank you, Trustee Jankowicz. Trustee Reiser.
On the 24th, I also listened in to the 7-Eleven committee meeting. On August 25th, I participated in the Curriculum and Student Support Board Advisory Committee. We'll report on that in a little bit. On August 31st, along with Trustee Water, I met with Jim Wilson, who's working as an advisor to Napa Schools for Climate Action, and has been working with our student board member, Emily Bitt, and her co-president, Elisa Karish, just to hear about the work that he's doing with the students related to our climate emergency. And we discussed ways that the school district can continue to support the efforts of our student activists on behalf of humanity and the world. Also on the 31st, I listened in on the first Citizens Advisory Committee meeting, which convened for the task of choosing a new name for the Middle School Language Academy. And on September 7th, I listened in on the third 7-Eleven committee meeting as well. And I just wanted to close by talking just briefly to say that September is Suicide Prevention and Awareness Month. And actually today, September 9th, has been declared World Suicide Awareness Day. I just want to read a small part of the proclamation that was released by President Biden in the White House today. He says, today the United States joins the World Health Organization, the International Association for Suicide Prevention, and nations around the world in commemorating World Suicide Prevention Day by creating hope through action. On this day and every day, we remember those lives lost to suicide. We also commit to connecting with those who are struggling and to encouraging communities, organizations, and governments to work together to prevent suicide. Suicide often occurs in moments of unbearable pain or deep despair. Many individuals with mental health needs are overcome with a sense of overwhelming hopelessness and feel that they have nowhere to turn. We have already millions of Americans consider suicide, make a plan, or attempt every year, especially young Americans for whom suicide is the second leading cause of death. This number is even higher among our LGBTQ+ and Native American youth. In 2019, it was the 10th leading cause of death in the United States. And that was before COVID compounded all of this. So that concludes what President Biden said, and now I'm talking as me. I just want to say I'm really proud of our district for the way we are centering mental health support more and more in the work that we do. And we're going to be hearing and voting on some memorandums and contracts later on in the meeting that are centered around that work. We have really strong and powerful partners in our community. We're very lucky to have organizations like Mentis and the group within Mentis Teens Connect program. We have Voices, LGBTQ Connection, and News. So I'm just grateful for those community partners in this effort to support our fellow citizens in their mental wellness. And just to bring it back to my, issue of passion outside of the school board, which is gun violence prevention, many people don't realize that 61% of deaths by gun are suicides. So more than half of every gun death is a suicide by gun. So I just, on that note, want to thank the board for supporting the safe storage resolution that we passed in the spring. And make note that we did send home safe storage information to our NVUSD families at the start of this school year. And I'll take this opportunity to just remind everybody on World Suicide Prevention Awareness Day that all guns should be locked and stored separately from their ammunition. We know that eliminating access to lethal weapons saves lives if someone is struggling with depression or despair. And I will end by saying to the community who's listening, if you or a loved one are thinking about suicide, please know that you're not alone and that help is available 24/7. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline you can call is 1-800-273-TALK, TALK, or you can use the crisis text line by texting HOME, HOME, to 741-741. So this concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Reiser. Trustee Water?
I was just listening, and I believe you and I were at the same Zoom meeting, so I don't need to go over that, but I would like to add that it was a student of mine who started Voices many years ago, a foster child. And who would have thought that the organization would have continued and gotten so much support in our community? He did a good thing. And the only you probably did this too, but I took my test on being a mandated reporter of child abuse. I was 3 days late. Yes, I missed the deadline, but I did get 100%. And it's the fourth time I've taken the test, so I should get 100%. But I was reading it and I was thinking, this is we all roll our eyes when we have to do this, but it takes about an hour, and you have other things to do too. But it's a good reminder, and I was thinking of the truly serious responsibility that our teachers, all the people who work in our schools have. So I was glad I took it.
Thank you, Trustee Water. Trustee Chu?
So I also attended many of the meetings that other trustees have attended, the 7-11 committee meetings, the Citizen Advisory Committee meeting, Finance Committee meeting. The one extra thing I thought I did these 3 weeks was I actually attended and observed one of the first mobile testing units that was deployed at Canyon Oaks Elementary. This was in response to a positive case for one of the students in 3rd grade in one of the 3rd grade classes. And the parents were pleasantly surprised that the district offered mobile testing on site at the schools for their children. Several parents went, to help their children, but most of the students did the test by themselves with monitoring by the staff and also one nurse. And thank you, Principal Stephanie Vasquez, for allowing me to do that and be observing of one of the first. So there, of course, being one of the first, there are things that we can do better. But I was very surprised that the kids did so well. The test results came back in 24 hours. It was very cute. One of the kids was a little apprehensive, but her friend said, you know what, I did it over summer and it's okay. It doesn't hurt, it just tickles your nose. So these kids knew how to comfort each other. It's very, very heartwarming to know that these kids are doing well in school and being able to navigate this time. Of course, some of the feedback, I think Sylvia, who came on in public comment, had mentioned, those are the types of feedback that I've gotten from the community. I'm always at the elementary school because I drop off my children, I see the parents, and so I'm kind of on the ground with their probably most accessible person at the district because they can't go on campus. So it is a concern of the community. I'm sure it's the same up in Napa as well. So, I'm just hoping that we can get more resources to make it better. Oh, and one more thing that I did attend this morning was the American Canyon Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Committee, where I provided an update on school reopening.
Thank you, Trustee Chu. Trustee Dooley?
I attended, well, I wasn't able to attend the 7-Eleven meetings live, but I watched the videos and read the materials. I did attend the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting. I was impressed by the discussion and look forward to kind of the ideas that they bring to the next meeting. I also attended the virtual back to school night for Northwood Elementary School. It was one we all hoped would be in person again, but that's an event that it's best to be safe and careful. And with the experience last year of a virtual back to school night, it worked pretty well this year. It was nice to meet my son's teacher. And we had not quite a family scare, but we experienced the response for illness and had to get tested to make sure that we could go back to school. So we definitely it raises the issue. We had to wait a couple days before we could get tested, and it was availability of resources is really the key. The ability to kind of promptly respond to the ever-changing events is really the key. So I know we are doing everything we can to get there, and it's a statewide, nationwide, worldwide, really, issue. And I think we've put ourselves in a position to respond to these things as well as we can, and that's where we are. I was excited to hear the Students of the Month again, the first time this year. It's one of my favorite parts of our agenda, so I'm glad that it's back.
Thank you, Trustee Dooley. All right, that concludes our Board of Education Student Board Rep updates here. So now we move on to Board Representatives' reports under our committees. Curriculum and Student Support Committee.
Yes, I'll be giving the report for that, and I will try to be brief, but there was so much really great information in that meeting, and I want to make sure that my fellow trustees that are not on that advisory committee can get the full update. So we met on August 25th, and there were three main topics of our of our meeting. The first was to get an update from Director Sarah Knox about our MTSS developing program rollout. The multi-tiered system of support is what that stands for. It's in line with our board priority number 2. And I'll just give a little overview of what she shared with us. So the MTSS is a system that's set up to address academic, behavioral, and social emotional needs or concerns that come up with our students. Recognizing, of course, that there can be multiple, that a student can have both academic and social emotional needs that need to be on our radar. The work of sort of creating this new approach began with a self-assessment tool at each site to really have kind of an honest reflection about what resources and approaches are in place, what's working and what's missing. Each site in our district has an MTSS leadership team, and that team met to do the self-analysis, and the consensus was that there are pockets of excellence and strong implementation across the district, and there are also pockets that need support and improvement. And on the whole, the staff agreed, and this project this program that our team is working on is going to address this. The consensus was we needed to work on the coherence and continuity of our approach to interventions with students. And so I'm really excited and jazzed about this rollout, and I'll explain why. So the following, there's a few points here. One of the things that has been implemented is universal screening for all students. And this is, so that students don't fall through the cracks, and that we make sure that we identify their needs as soon as possible and, get to interventions that are going to help them get through their challenges. So for academics, we're using the STAR language, arts, and math assessments. And then a fairly new universal screener that I think began last year is called the SDQ. It's given to all students at the start of the year, I think, and it stands for Strengths and Difficulties Questionnaire. So it's a tool that's used to feel students out about how they're feeling in school, and then we can use that data to assess how we're doing in our school climate and then meeting their needs. Another aspect of the MTSS is in the name. There we have tiered interventions. So we have tier 1, our interventions that happen in the general ed classroom with the regular teacher, and all students benefit from those interventions. And then tier 2 and 3 get more focused in if and when those tier 1 classroom interventions are not bringing about enough progress for the student who's struggling. And then another key component to this MTSS rollout is that it includes progress monitoring, which is really important. If you're doing interventions, but then you're not tracking their impact, then how do you know whether those interventions are successful, or whether the kid needs them anymore, or whether they really need something more? So I just want to give props to Directors Knox and also Dr. Aboud. They've been working together really hard to do something which to me is really exciting. They're taking our ARIES system, which we already had in place and used for attendance, and then we've been using it for grades and family communications. And with the help of Assistant Superintendent Manguala, who really did some interfacing with the ARIES company itself, kind of leaned on them and said, look, we'd like to use it and expand its use, but we're bumping up against these limitations of the functionality, and got them to work with us to make it a better tool. So yay Napa for making ARIES better for anyone who uses it. Okay, so one of the cool things about the use of the ARIES is that we can enter into the system indicators that a student might be vulnerable to struggling in some way or another. So if there are low test scores, then that is going to be entered in as a potential flag. If a student is an English learner and they're not advancing on their LPAC scores, that would be entered in there. And actually, even just an English learner would have sort of that indicated in their profile, because these things, as we know, can add up to be sort of additional challenges that make adequate progress more challenging. So the system has all of those factors entered in, and then it's just in the database with the student. So that right there is going to be, just a smart way to keep all of the information relevant to the student's success and potential struggles in one place. And then moving on from there, that's also where if a teacher is having a concern about a student, they can go into ARIES and talk about what interventions they've tried so far, what their concerns are, what they're doing in the class, what communication they've had with the parent, so that that's all documented. And then teachers are able then to make referrals to the MTSS team using ARIES. That's the mechanism by which that takes place. So then right there, it's just an easier flow, and that referral is then sent to the MTSS team to move on from there. And then the interventions that the MTSS team and the teachers implement at the tier 2 and tier 3 levels are also tracked in ARIES on that student's profile. And as a former teacher, I'm very excited about the functionality and the practicality of this for teachers, because it takes a long time to document things by hand, and documentation is key when you're working with students and trying to figure out what's working, what's not working, and what they need, and what gaps we need to fill in. But it takes a ton of time. And so this ARIES system is just going to really make it easier for teachers, because all of the strategies that are recommended, the high leverage research-based strategies that the MTSS and the instructional team have vetted and are recommending, they're all available in a drop-down menu. So if you've tried, it's basically, rather than having to hand write or hand type every time you go into the student's ARIES profile or whatever it's called, and then you can just go to a drop-down menu and select the things that you have tried, and then comment and document about how it's going, because the progress monitoring happens within ARIES as well. So to me, this is just going to be hugely powerful. The district is training teachers, and they really think that it's going to empower teachers to be more effective in working with students and meeting their needs. And in support of the continuity and coherence piece, the instructional services team is working on an MTSS handbook, so that's in process. But that would be that compilation that I referred to of the research-based practices that are recommended. And then they're also in the process of creating these sort of visual maps, like a graphic decision tree as a reference for teachers, to sort of be able to look and sort of visually scan and say, okay, well, I've done this and I've done this. What comes next? Oh, I haven't tried that one yet. Let me do that one next. So it just makes it systematic and consistent and coherent. And it's incredibly powerful to have it all in one place. In particular, at the secondary level, where students have many teachers, and you can, if you're an English teacher, you can go in and say, boy, I'm having problems with this student, and then you can go and see what your colleagues, who you don't really get to talk to because they're across the campus and you're always all teaching at the same time, you can communicate that way and share successes and struggles and what you've tried. So the positive impacts of this are students are not going to fall through the cracks. Let's see, that we hope to reach students earlier in their education, because the earlier you can intervene and address the learning gaps or the behavior challenges or the social emotional needs, the more years of success that student has ahead of him or her in our school system. The systematized documentation is really going to help create an accurate picture of the student. It's not going to be kind of a word of mouth or, oh, hey, let me grab you and talk to you quickly about this kid. And, that's how it goes with teachers. You're kind of, you try to confer, but it's challenging to confer when you are in your classroom from 8 to 3, and you're not you're not with your colleagues. So I think it's really going to enhance the communication between staff members. It's going to be a huge time saver to have everything in one place. I think it's really going to help newer teachers because a lot of things come at you when you're, a beginning teacher, and then to have the tool of the drop-down menu and the handbook of interventions, it sort of doesn't, I think will help newer teachers feel more supported. And I think in general, from my perspective, will help teachers feel less isolated in helping students that are facing challenges, because they will feel, the system of support. It's a system of support for the students, but it also supports the teachers that are trying to help them. So the progress so far is all of the MTSS leads and elementary school principals, and the principals will have a thought partner at their elementary sites, but the elementary school principals are the MTSS leads. That's not the case at the secondary level. There's a separate part-time person that has that responsibility. They've also trained already the counselors and social workers, and all the secondary principals have been trained. Site leads and administrators are in the process of training all of the teachers at their site on the pre-referral system and the steps to follow in ARIES to get them comfortable with it. So it's a tool that they feel good about using. And we'll be getting a mid-year update that is going to include success indicators and also the finished product of the MTSS handbooks. So that concludes that part of the report. But I just want to say again, I'm so excited about this. I think it's really going to be powerful, and I think it's going to make a real difference in the way we can help students. Okay, then I'm not going to go into detail on the second topic. That was our special education recommendations implementing from the FCMAT report. I'm going to leave that to our expert, Terry Lynn Rossetti, who's going to be sharing the full update with us later on in the meeting. But I just want to thank her in advance of her report for all the hard work and the tangible progress that she and her department have made in implementing those recommendations. Okay, and then the final topic of our meeting was the middle school redesign team update. And we received that update from Director Monica Reddy. She told us that the district has contracted with a firm called Design for Emergence to support us in arriving at intentional, thoughtful, and attainable program redesign, including arriving at a cohesive vision and design principles. The middle school redesign team is made of students, staff, and families from all 5 middle schools in the district. I'm really proud of us for making the intentional choice to center student voices in this process. Their input has really been valuable. And I just think that grounds us in the student experience when we're hearing from students about what they experience. So this fall, there are going to be 3 sessions with Design for Emergence. One will be with district leadership to describe for lack of a better word, our constraints, to make sure that we're grounded in what's possible. We don't want to spend a lot of time envisioning a program that we can't implement. So that's the first step, to make sure we know what our resources are and what our constraints are and what our requirements are. And there will be a stakeholder session in which we'll review the vision and design principles. And then they will revise and update the changes in the schools based on those agreed upon principles. So in the spring of 2022, we're going to implement a transition plan, given that will be we'll be approaching the closure of the Harvest Middle School campus at the end of this school year. The district will be providing coaching for site level teams with a real focus and emphasis on making a supportive transition for the 2022-2023 school year. Really focusing on being responsive to the needs of our students, our families, and our teachers and staff who are impacted by this big change. We got an update briefly on the Middle School Language Academy separately, although they are part of the whole middle school design team. We know that they've completed the process of creating their finalized mission and vision statements. We heard them at the last board meeting. And then as we mentioned in our board reports, the Citizens Advisory Committee has been formed and they've had their first meeting. They're tasked with choosing a new name for the Language Academy. And then the other middle school redesign or design team component is our TK-8 pilot program that has begun at Shear Elementary School this year. So just an update on that for, I know the trustees know, but we added a 6th grade cohort to Shear Elementary School for this school year. We need 32 students to constitute enough of a cohort to add a cohort to a school. So we are hoping that there will be enough community interest to not only continue and add a 7th grade cohort at Shear next year to continue all the way to the K-8 span, but also next year, community interest willing to add both a 6th and a 7th grade cohort to the Browns Valley Elementary, if we do indeed move forward with that pilot, so that if we add 6th and 7th at the same time, they'll be on par with the Shear pilot site as well. We have Director Manning, I know, is working with the principals of Shear and Browns Valley and really wanting to make sure that the TK-8 experience is a different experience than a standalone middle school, but also that it feels different for the students who went to elementary school there from elementary school. So wanting to really make a marcation for those kids that are at the middle school level within the TK-8 spectrum. So Director Manning is working on that with Principal Brian Gardner at Shear. They're looking at the potential for maybe doing leadership and community involvement projects as something to sort of separate out the middle school students. And lastly, they are hoping, they're working to hopefully present the Shear and Browns Valley TK-8 options in this November's enrollment cycle for next school year. And then I thought this was very interesting. They shared their takeaways from the student input that they had gotten on the middle school team. And the takeaways from the students are the students value communication and collaboration. They value civic engagement and involvement. They value cultivating a deep sense of connection to the school and to each other. And they really communicated the importance of feeling seen and known by their school community, and getting a sense that their presence matters, that people know that they're there and that it matters that they're there at their school. So I just thought that was really interesting, going back to my grounding it in the student experience. And lastly, the updates from the middle school design team are going to be agendized monthly, so we will hear updates as we go throughout the year. And this concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Reiser. Now, report on Facilities and Technology Committee.
We have not yet met.
Finance Committee.
We did meet. This evening, the business office led by Assistant Superintendent Manguala will present the unaudited actuals. We reviewed the financials and accompanying data and then had the opportunity to ask clarifying questions. My report would have the same content as Mr. Manguala, so I will just list the topics that will be covered as to not be duplicative. Mr. Manguala reviewed the economic climate and unemployment data to give context to educational impact. We reviewed the uncertainty of COVID, its financial impact on the district, including one-time funding. We continue to discuss declining enrollment, projections, and actuals, as well as the budget implications. Mr. Manguala will share some good news regarding the reserve, but also the realities of the reserve and context as it relates to our overall financial health. The second to the last slide is critically important, and that is the cautionary tale associated with declining enrollment and staffing and the priority of fiscal solvency so we may continue to best serve our students. And we concluded with budget next steps, which included discussion on TK. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Trustee Jankowicz. Now we're on to Policy Committee.
We have not met.
Have not met. Thank you. Special Education Community Advisory Committee.
We have not met.
City of American Canyon Liaison Representatives.
We'll meet next week.
Okay, thank you. City of Napa Liaison Representatives. In Town of Yountville.
We have not yet met.
Thank you. We are now going to go to Superintendent and Executive Staff.
Thank you, President Gonzalez Mares. Good evening, NVUSD community. Tonight, as part of my report, I am just going to read a communication that I sent out to all NVUSD staff earlier today. And I'll deviate a little bit from the letter to elaborate on some of the points that have emerged in this first part of our meeting through public comment, and also some of the things that have been mentioned by trustees in their report. So as we bring our third full week of school of the 21-22 school year to a close, I continue to experience awe, amazement, gratitude, and courage as our organization provides exceptional education during this persistent, ever-evolving pandemic. I'm well aware of the operational pressures on our system as COVID-19 and the Delta variant present us with new and ongoing roadblocks and challenges. And some of you as trustees have mentioned that. I know your tentacles are out there in the community. You're hearing about that. We heard that from our ACMS and Canyon Oaks parent through public comment as well. And so we recognize them. And I just want to reiterate that this is a statewide issue. We are Napa Valley Unified School District, and we will address these concerns to the best of our ability. As we've demonstrated over the course of the last year, we always want to be a statewide leader in providing exceptional education, even in these difficult times. However, it's a statewide issue. There's a lot of challenges, and we'll continue to refine our work. But what does the NVUSD staff do in response to this ever-changing, demanding landscape? We persist. I believe we stay strong. We remain present for our students. We recommit to our district's vision of transforming lives by instilling and inspiring lifelong learning in every student. And I cannot envision or imagine better examples of breathing life into that vision, better examples than what was brought forth by Principal Crystal Lopez and Dr. Ainsworth from Napa High School through the stories of Marcus, Caitlin, Alondra, and Dalila. Just extraordinary examples of our vision being manifested. I want to personally thank each NVUSD employee for your daily work in breathing life into this vision in service to our NVUSD students and families, despite the challenging conditions we continue to face. As your superintendent, I'm so inspired by your courage and commitment. And once again, I have to share tonight, as I shared with employees internally earlier today, that I've had to lean into that inspiration to confront my ongoing health struggles. On a personal note, I have some news to share this evening, and I'd like to put it on the record for the community at large. 2 weeks ago today, I underwent brain surgery. I started the 21-22 school year thinking my breast cancer was in the rearview mirror after successful treatment of chemotherapy and surgery. However, unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago, new symptoms emerged that led to the discovery that my breast cancer had surprisingly metastasized to the brain, causing the growth of a tumor that needed to be removed immediately. The great news is that once again, my team of doctors at UCSF have led me to a successful outcome. So here I am tonight, 2 weeks later, in the boardroom alongside my trustees, handling the business of the district. And for that, I'm really grateful. So I'll deviate from my statement and thank the trustees. You see, they've got the Team Musetti shirts on that I think Mr. Pearson was the key organizer throughout our first wave of fight against cancer with the initial breast cancer diagnosis. And so I need Team Musetti to keep going to work for me on my behalf. So thank you for representing tonight. The brain tumor has been eradicated, and now I just need to do a few sessions of radiation. My prognosis is good, although the last 2 weeks have been filled with lots of struggle and strife. I've also experienced so many blessings and miracles beyond what I could ever imagine or even describe. I'm still processing it all, to be honest. My recovery from the surgery has been fast, and I feel fantastic. So I hope you sense fantastic energy tonight because I feel good. Most importantly, though, I feel really grateful and an even deeper, renewed sense of purpose for the work that I get to do. Not that I have to do, but that I get to do as your superintendent of schools. We all struggle. When facing struggles in your own lives, you know the vulnerability, fear, and uncertainty that extreme, unanticipated circumstances like these can cause. I now know for sure, and I've learned that over the course of the last couple of weeks, that courage is not the absence of vulnerability, fear, and uncertainty, but rather our ability to move through challenges with acceptance, hope, love, and positivity, all relevant to what we are all experiencing as we serve our students and families in our new difficult conditions in today's world. I've chosen to practice acceptance, hope, love, and positivity as I remain committed to my healing, to my family, who I want to recognize and thank. My husband, my children, my extended family have been extraordinary supports for me over the course of the last couple of weeks. And to my professional work as your superintendent of schools. I want to express my gratitude to our 4 assistant superintendents who you'll hear from shortly. Assistant Superintendent, Ms. Dana Page, Mr. Mike Pearson, Mr. Rob Mangwala, Ms. Pat Andrew Jennings. They are the best in the business. They've done an extraordinary job over the course of the last couple of weeks. And I am forever indebted to the 4 of them. They're an extraordinary, world-class, gold standard, the list of adjectives could go on and on for me, team. I also want to recognize our executive assistants, Ms. Vera Morales and Julie Prezi, and then of course, the 7 trustees to the left and right of me for successfully holding down the fort these last couple of weeks as I dealt with these extraordinary circumstances. Your strong leadership, professional competence, unwavering support, and relentless hard work have been invaluable to me and our NVUSD community at large as the district successfully and steadily operated in these challenging conditions. Lastly, when I first shared about my breast cancer diagnosis, I experienced so much generosity from the NVUSD community in so many ways. It was amazing, and I will never forget how compassionate and giving this community was. From, you know, flowers to gifts to food. I mean, it just went on and on and on. And it's still the impression that it's left on me has been life-changing. But I just want to let everyone in. I want to let everyone know it's also overwhelming. Please do not feel compelled to provide me with anything. All I want is positive energy, thoughts, and prayers as you receive this latest update from me. I'm thrilled and grateful to be in the boardroom tonight with all of you for our regular business meeting. And as I finish up treatment and recovery this month, I look forward to seeing everyone out at the schools, being present with our students and staff on our campuses. It is going to bring me joy in ways that I cannot even express after experiencing all of this over the course of the last couple of weeks. So I want to remind my trustees, staff that's on the call tonight, any community that might be participating as public in the board meeting, that our theme this year in NVUSD, that we started, you know, our school year, and it's a good theme to lean into during hard moments, is NVUSD stronger together, better than ever. And I've been leaning into this theme one day at a time, sometimes one moment at a time, and it's helped tremendously. So thank you for listening this evening. And I'd like to turn it over now to my assistant superintendents who've got a lot of details to tell you about what's happened since the last board meeting. So we're going to start off with Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Rob Mangwala, who oversees business services.
Good evening. I will forgo my update tonight as I'll be providing a very comprehensive update about our budget when I present unaudited actuals later tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mangwala. I'd like to hear from Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Ms. Dana Page.
Good evening, President Gonzalez-Maras, Board of Trustees, Dr. Massetti, and Student Board Representative Bitt. Tonight, I have several examples of how HR is working to fulfill our mission of building a strong team for NVUSD under Goal 2 of the strategic plan. Despite a nationwide shortage of workers in the healthcare and education sector, we are relentlessly forging ahead to attract and hire the best employees to fill some key positions. One hard to fill position has been instructional assistants who provide not only academic support, but also personal care for our students with special needs. We recognize the unique and challenging nature of this position as it takes the right skill set along with a deeply compassionate and nurturing personality. We are encouraging candidates with the passion for the work to apply and are offering additional paid training hours for new hires to develop the skills they will need for success. New candidates will also have access all year to an online training platform paid for by the district where they can continue their professional development on demand and earn credit towards a 5% raise through the professional growth stipend. Substitute teachers are also in high demand. Without substitute teachers, we struggle to cover absences due to illnesses, especially with lengthy quarantine periods required due to COVID-19. Currently, we have had to suspend all discretionary absences in school business and deploy TOSAs, counselors, administrators to cover for absent teachers. In response to this, we have designated substitute positions as hard to fill and temporarily raised substitute teacher pay rates as follows. For non-credentialed subs with just a 30-day permit, for a daily assignment, you'll now earn $210 a day. And for a long-term assignment, $230. For credentialed substitutes, $230 for a daily assignment and $250 for a long-term assignment. We will be hosting a welcome and welcome back informational session for new and returning substitute teachers on September 15th at 2 o'clock via Zoom, and an informational session for prospective substitute teachers on September 22nd from 12 to 1. Finally, for credentialed nurses who have had the distinction of being both part of the healthcare and education sectors, these are extremely hard to fill positions. We are offering a hiring bonus of $10,000 to be paid over 4 years. We are also exploring some contracts with temporary or substitute nurses as well. One challenge for our current nursing staff is the amount of time spent on COVID-related contact tracing and testing. To help with that, we just hired 3 new health clerks who, once trained, will be able to take on those duties to help relieve some of the additional work our credentialed nurses have absorbed. These strategies should provide a relief to some of the pain points we are currently experiencing because of the same staffing shortages plaguing most school districts. In the meantime, I want to thank all of the teachers, nurses, TOSAs, principals, assistant principals, counselors, psychologists, speech language pathologists, office managers, special education staff, and instructional directors who have served as subs, filled in for IAs, taken extra caseload, and problem solved on the fly while we get through this challenge. I want to thank everyone who has stepped up to get us through, as well as thank those who have been voicing concerns and reaching out to illuminate the issues. I want to assure you that we are aware of the crisis and we are working hard on sustainable solutions. And this concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Page. I'm going to ask next that we hear from Assistant Superintendent of the Instructional Services Division, Ms. Pat Andrew Jennings.
Good evening, President Gonzalez Maras, Board Trustees, Student Board Representative Bitt, Dr. Mercetti, and NVUSD community. We are 3 weeks into the new school year and are focused on the board's annual priorities while also addressing the ongoing challenges presented with all students attending school full-time during the pandemic. Our site leaders and school staff continue to work hard to keep our students safe. Since school started, they have engaged in contact tracing of COVID positive students, held COVID testing sessions at their school sites, and educated families on the quarantine protocols. I want to especially thank our school nurses and Mike Mansway, who have gone above and beyond to provide support to school sites, communicate with Napa County Public Health, all while monitoring our students' ongoing health needs. They really have been tremendous. I also want to take this moment to encourage those who are eligible to be vaccinated to get vaccinated. It does help to keep students in school. We continue to make progress on the board's annual priority number 1, which spotlights the work on the redesign of our middle schools. The Citizen Advisory Committee, tasked with making recommendations for the renaming of the Middle School Language Academy, met for the first time on August 31st. Lorenzo Smith, attorneys at law, provided an overview of the role and procedures of the Citizen Advisory Committee, and NVUSD staff reviewed the board policy and mission and vision of the new Middle School Language Academy as guiding principles for the recommendation process. We are grateful for the community, staff, and family members who are actively participating in the process, and they represent a breadth of interest from upcoming dual language immersion parents to veteran staff and families committed to bilingualism and biliteracy. I'm excited by this monumental first step to name the new Middle School Language Academy, and I look forward to sharing the Citizen Advisory Committee's recommendation in October. Tonight, I'd like to share the progress being made on board annual priority number 2, which is focused on the implementation of MTSS. You'll hear a little bit later from Director Knox around its connection to our special education program. Last year, the board approved the purchase of an elementary phonics intervention program. This program enables our elementary intervention teachers to provide a comprehensive supplemental human intervention focused on bolstering the foundational reading skills of students needing strategic and intensive support. While we await the arrival of the materials this month, our intervention teachers are assessing students with screening and diagnostic assessment tools. Board priority number 3, focused on math, has not been forgotten. Elementary math professionals learning and coaching is scheduled to begin next week. This will be the first of 6 weeks of support scheduled throughout the year. Next week, elementary intervention teachers will be trained to use the Bridges Math Intervention Program to support their small group instruction. And then at the secondary level, the Secondary Math Pathway Work Group launched the first of 4 meetings to determine flexible and expanded pathways at the high school level, which will include a diverse third year of high school math course offerings. This work group will align placement and intervention practices as well. And lastly, we can't forget about board annual priority number 5, which is centered on enhancing communication and family engagement. Our NVUSD Parent Learning Series, which was highly successful last year, will launch next week with a class on mindfulness taught by our own NVUSD social worker, Daniel Swafford. Also, on September 20th at 5:30 in the evening, the noted author of The Happiness Track, Emma Seppala, will be in conversation with Dr. Massetti and will discuss the science behind resiliency, willpower, compassion, positive stress, creativity, and mindfulness. Seppala is a lecturer at the Yale School of Management, a faculty director of the Yale School of Management's Women's Leadership Program, and the science director of Stanford University's Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. I hope families will be able to join both virtual sessions. Thank you. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Pottinger-Jennings. And we'd like to hear now from Assistant Superintendent, Mr. Mike Pearson, who oversees the Operational Services Division.
Good evening, President Gonzalez-Maras, MVUSD Board of Education trustees, Dr. Musetti, Student Board Representative Emily Bitt, and members of the MVUSD community. Thank you for the opportunity to provide each of you with an update on operational services. The entire operational staff continues to perform exemplary work for staff and students in the school district. Despite some challenges, mainly in the food service and the need for staff to remain extremely flexible, the operations team is committed to the role in fulfilling the district's vision of transforming lives by instilling and inspiring lifelong learning in every student. Some highlights of work currently underway in operational services. In food services, the nationwide supply chain disruptions are impacting our food services department. The entire supply chain is experiencing driver and labor shortages, increased costs, and driver and delivery delays. Under the direction of Kristen Tikel, food services is working extremely hard to ensure that there is lunch every day for any student who desires a meal. But there might be menu substitutions depending upon demand. Food service and the communications departments have developed a real-time menu that will be updated as best as possible with the menu changes to keep parents and students informed, as well as staff. This information on menus can be found at www.mvusd.org/lunch menus. The maintenance staff, led by Albert DeSouza, is conducting a second round of visual inspections at each school site using the facility inspection tool assessment. As a reminder, the first round of visual inspections occurred earlier this spring. Any visual deficiencies noted will generate a work order that will be completed prior to the facility data being uploaded into each school accountability report card, which happens in roughly October of this year. School planning and construction staff has conducted a preliminary assessment of availability for additional transitional kindergarten classrooms at NVUSD school sites for the 22-23 school year. And this information will be shared at an upcoming TK planning meeting involving various stakeholders. The NVUSD employee COVID testing sites have been established at 2 locations. The operation team led by Gloria Aguirre has done an outstanding job coordinating with human resources to ensure both testing locations have necessary supplies and equipment. And finally, NVUSD school sites continue to be used by Napa County Public Health as vaccination clinics. Last week, second vaccination doses were administered at Phillips Elementary School and Harvest Middle School. And earlier this week, second doses occurred at American Canyon Middle School. Next week, the second vaccination dose will be administered at McPherson Elementary School. And currently, NVUSD staff is also planning future dates with Napa County Public Health to offer additional vaccination sites. This concludes my report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. President Gonzalez Mares, just one last comment to wrap up executive reports. I want to make my trustee Cindy Water, my English teacher on the board, very proud, is that there is so much going on. There's been so much going on, as I shared through my letter. I shared with trustee Water that I've been journaling, and I think we might have a book on the horizon in the future, trustee Water. So I know you value journaling. It's like COVID, cancer, and the California Public School Superintendent Say or something like that. But I'm journaling daily. So I'm going to lunch with her and flesh out ideas, and I'm sure she's going to steer me in the right direction. Yes. So thanks for all your support, everyone.
I'm going to take just a quick moment, Dr. Musetti, but first I want to ask Assistant Superintendent Mr. Pearson to show the model, the t-shirt we're all wearing tonight. Would you be so kind to?
I would be happy, President Gonzalez Mares. So on the front, as you can see, we have the NVUSD logo with NVUSD, and we have it in the bright pink. And then on the back, I will turn around, see myself, you have Team Musetti on the back. And we wear these with pride.
Thank you,
and love and support and compassion.
Modeling when he retires.
And I just symbolizes a lot of the energy that we're feeling today in the room, and also with our assistant superintendents. I am still processing what the last 2 weeks were like for all of us, and obviously we cannot imagine, and we still cannot imagine what you had to go through personally and still are going through, Dr. Musetti. And but there is a team that has been built over the years, and that is bigger than what's in this room tonight. It's our entire NVUSD family, and that we are there for each other. And at this time, it wasn't just a requirement, it was what felt in our hearts to do, was to be there for you as our fierce leader and our superintendent. You have tremendous amount of not only responsibility, but you do it with such passion and commitment and integrity and such strong values that what comes forth in front of you, it becomes almost like a moment in space, and you make magic out of it. It's inspiring. It is it levels us in the space of that we're human, and that our own leader is a human being that needs to take care of herself. But just the level of work and just ethic behind all of that is absolutely incredible. I don't know, unless you read it in books, which I'm hoping you do make that book, because there is a level of leadership and in that, and I feel even more lucky that we have you as our superintendent, that you chose us just as we chose you, and that our community and our children and our staff and everybody around us is in good hands, because not only did you fight for your life, but at the same time, you never lost touch of fighting for our students. And that is something that we can never repay for that. We are very grateful for that, because it really reached a point where I just don't want to, it's just so important to not forget that you were fighting for your life, and that this board came together as a team, and our assistant superintendents came together, and we knew what to do. It was really clear because all of that hard work that you helped in leading that effort helped us move forward as if like everything was okay. It's such an odd feeling. Wasn't it such an odd feeling to know that, she was going to go under brain surgery, but everything else felt controlled, like everything was going to be fine. So thank you for that. And we know that we're here for you. Team Massetti's here for you. And that sense of having you heal and having you continue to do the great work that you're doing, and just how forever grateful for that we are, and also for that lesson. There's something to be left here with you, is that there's a lesson here that we can all learn as your fellow human beings. And yes, we're your board, and collectively we're your supervisors. But at the end of the day, just really thanking you for being who you are, and for the lesson, and for inspiring not only us, but the rest of the NVUSD. So thank you, Dr. Massetti, and we are here for you and your family. And we appreciate everything that you have done, and the sacrifice that it takes, because it's at the end of the day, it's your life. So I want us to value that. And I think it's really important to take that into consideration. And like I said, it just amazingly, it just feels today's a business meeting, because it will go on, and it must go on because it has to go on. But not without a level of sacrifice and a level of hard work to get to that point. So thank you. Thank you, thank you, President Gonzalez Mares. And now I made you cry, and I didn't want to do that.
You did. I'm crying.
It's good to cry. So just with that being said, because we are reaching our 9 p.m. mark, it's a good time to take a break. How about that? And we'll be right back. Thank you. Okay, thank you, everybody, for that moment of letting us stretch our backs.
Yeah. You know, we cried and then we stretched our backs. This is good.
Yeah. Okay, so now we are moving to item I of our agenda. This is the approval of consent agenda.
Second.
A first by trustee Water, a second by trustee Gracia. Do I have any public comment under this item, Mr. Bassinet?
There's no public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you. Vera, if you could conduct roll call, please.
Yes, student board member,
Aye.
trustee Gonzalez Mares,
Aye.
trustee Jankowicz,
Aye.
trustee Gracia,
Aye.
trustee Ricer,
Aye.
trustee Water,
Aye.
trustee Chu,
Aye.
trustee Dooley.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. All right, that gets us into our presentations and discussion items. So this is item J1A, an audited actuals presentation.
Angola. Mr. Manuela.
Yes, Dr. Massetti? I'm
All right.
sorry, I didn't hear that. I had an audio issue. I'm sorry.
Can you hear us? We're ready for audited actuals.
Yes, I can hear you now. I'm sorry, I had an audio issue. Can you please start the slideshow for me, please? Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the unaudited actual with the board tonight. Next slide, please. So from the national level, real gross domestic product has completely recovered from the COVID-19 recession in just 1.5 years. The Great Recession took a total of 3.5 years to recover. So you can see the economy is definitely moving in the correct direction. Unfortunately, the unemployment rate is still fairly substantial, sitting at 5.4% at the national level and 7.6% at the state level. Primarily in California, this is a result of being dependent on jobs in the service sector. Next slide, please. So there's a great disconnect going on in the economy where we have 10.4 million job openings and 8.4 million people who are still employed. And so it's a boom time for hiring. Even though there's a boom time for hiring, employers are finding it hard to find enough employees to hire. So a national reassessment of the industries that employers are willing to work at is occurring. Movement from certain industries such as education and the service industry is definitely occurring. There are supply chain problems that people are having difficulty having supplies delivered and even obtaining supplies. So when there's greater demand for employees, goods, and services, inflation will occur, especially on wages where there's high demand. Next slide, please. In terms of job openings, there's certainly a shortfall in education. This slide shows the number of job openings and the number of people that are available to be hired. So you can see in education, there's a total of 1.7 million job openings, and yet there's only 1.1 million people in the industry. So there's a shortfall of over 600,000 education and 200,000 in leisure and hospitality. Next slide, please. In California, you can see that revenues are coming in higher than forecast. So the revenues have come in at an 18.4% increase over what was projected. So it was forecast to be $8.3 billion. We landed at $9.9 billion, or an increase of $1.5 billion. This, so even though this is a very rosy picture for our economy in California, I do suggest that we don't look at this as anything more than one data point. There's still 11 additional months to kind of look at what revenues will look like for the remainder of the year. Next slide, please. So there's still a great deal of uncertainty due to COVID-19. There's a loss of average daily attendance that's occurring. Whereas last year there was fixed average daily attendance. This year at the state level, there is no flexibility with ADA. Students that stay home as a result of COVID-19, they're required to do independent study, and teachers are required to provide them with work. So It's certainly not a best case scenario like we had last year. So we anticipate that we will definitely have a lower than average daily attendance. One-time monies help with the reserve, but it doesn't solve the structural problem where, again, declining enrollment continues to add to the structural deficit where we receive less and less in revenues due to having less students. Next slide, please. So in terms of the actual enrollment decline, you can see in this slide that typically our decline is somewhere between about 150 students and 250 students. However, in the last 2 years, we've had a decline of 426 students. And so, the number that we have in front of us right now of 16,523 while that may change, I don't anticipate that it will swing more than 100 in either direction. So our enrollment decline is definitely more than we anticipated. Next slide, please. When you look at Aries and you compare that to our projection, you can see that even compared to our lowest projection, the enrollment decline is 158 students lower than our lowest projection. And so, again, we will watch this closely. Next slide, please. So there is potential support for declining enrollment on the horizon. So the potential support is the addition of transitional kindergarten. So TK will be available over the next 4 years for all students who are 4 years old or over. It will transition about 2 months per year over the next 4 years. And so one of the things that we need to look at is we need to look very closely at how expanded TK eligibility will reduce our declining enrollment and what percentage of our declining enrollment will be offset. So we know that the projected enrollment in TK will not completely erase the decline. Will it hit 50% of it, 60% of it? That's yet to be determined. So, I do exercise caution. I suggest that we exercise caution here. Next slide. So this slide represents our budget at budget adoption. You can see here that we anticipate pretty substantial declining enrollment, which results in a net decrease in our fund balance because we're spending more than we bring in. So the deficit in year 2 is about $7.7 million. In year 3, $8.1 million. While we're meeting the reserve requirements over the 3 years in our budget, it's because we have healthy reserves, right? So having healthy reserves gives you the time to address declining enrollment. Next slide, please. So this slide shows where we're sitting at an audit actuals. A couple things I want to point out here. So you can see our revenues are about where we anticipated, but expenses were a lot less. So running a school district in a pandemic is less expensive when you're operating virtually. So this year it will not look like last year. Our expenses will definitely go up. But when schools aren't open for in-person instruction as much, you save money on gas, electricity, sub costs, et cetera. And so as a result, we've had a pretty substantial increase in our reserves. So our reserves have gone up to 17%. We're still below the average reserve for a school district. So the average reserve for a unified school district is 18.8%. So we're sitting about a percentage below that. But it's something that we need. Reserves are needed to give you the time to execute on the reduction in costs due to declining enrollment. Next slide, please. So this slide again shows what districts have in terms of reserves, looking at unified elementary schools and high school districts. And again, unified school districts on average have a reserve of about 18.8% for 1920. I anticipate that this number for 2021 will go up for all school districts. And so we will see this go up. Next slide. So there are a lot of benefits to having healthy reserves. Reserves give you the time necessary to make the decisions to address deficit spending due to declining enrollment through reductions in employee and facility costs. Reserves also give you the ability to provide a compensation increase and remain fiscally solvent and stable to attract and retain the most qualified employees possible. Reserves can fund one-time expenses such as an off-schedule salary increase, while ongoing compensation increases must be funded by ongoing money. Next slide. So the reality of reserves, again, reserves are one-time money. Once they're spent, they're gone unless you build reserves by having expenses less than revenues. Declining enrollment will continue to deplete reserves over time. Next slide. So again, why have our reserves improved more than we anticipated? They're temporary savings due to unique circumstances, such as running a school district virtually. It's less expensive. Reduced supply costs, restrictions on travel, conference, professional development due to the pandemic led to one-time savings. Not filling some positions where there wasn't the ability to perform the work remotely, ability to offset some expenses with one-time money led to one-time savings. Also, the hold harmless ADA bought us some time and kept our revenues higher than they should have been. Next slide. So going forward, I suggest that we move with caution. Again, the district is running a district remotely is less expensive than in person. We know from some of the other information that we spoke about tonight, the cost of wages, goods, and services are all going up in this economy we have right now. There's a shortage of supplies, there's a shortage of employees, and employees are generally really kind of taking a reassessment and figuring out what industry they want to continue working in. Operational expenses will certainly increase. Declining enrollment will continue to create challenges such as deficit spending. And this slide, so again, following staffing formulas and reduction in other costs will certainly be necessary. Next slide. So our next steps, we're going to work very closely with our demographer to determine how additional TK students will offset a portion of our expected decline in enrollment. So again, all of our decline will not be offset by this, but it will offset a portion of it. We need to continue to work with HR and instruction around new expanded learning for after school and new TK students, continue to refine staffing formulas, actively recruit TK students. This last bullet, I'm happy to announce that we did reach an agreement, so we do not need to run the compensation formula. We're done with the compensation formula, and you will see an item later on tonight around the AB 1200, which outlines the compensation formula number that we reached. And then the next time we meet to talk about budget, we'll talk about first interim. Next slide. And with that, I'm open to any questions or comments.
So one of the things I wanted to highlight is the inequity imposed by the state, where they force us to quarantine our students and then penalize us for those missed ADA days. That seems rather terrible, that they force the quarantine and then penalize our ADA income because of the quarantine. So that's certainly not an appropriate, it seems like, result from them. The other piece that I wanted to highlight was that we've lost over the last 2 years approximately 860 students based on the data shared tonight, which is a lot of students that have gone missing from our system. And we really need to take that into account as we prepare our future budgets.
Thank you.
I thought the presentation was an acknowledgement of how the arduous, sometimes painful, but necessary work has allowed us to have the leverage to reward those that have given their all during unparalleled circumstances. It was a clear indicator of the difficult but critical foundational work that has been done to date. I'm sorry, wait, hold on. I don't know where. Okay, sorry. Critical foundational work that has been to date that has allowed us the privilege of gratitude to our teachers with one-time compensation. The righting of the ship is a term our superintendent and CBO have used strategically and thoughtfully. And because we stayed the course, not always popular, we were positioned to calm the financial waters by increasing the reserve. Had we not, our one-time monies would have been allocated differently. There would not have been a faculty payment, and our reserves might have flirted with increased levels, but not to this degree, and it would have been fleeting. Tremendous amount of effort goes into analyzing all the mitigating factors that influence and contribute to this budget, and there's no guaranteed consistent source of revenue. The state uses a school district ADA to determine its total general purpose revenue limit funding. Some special purpose kind of categorical funding is based on ADA as well. This is a difficult dance. And so does this discussion sound repetitive? It does, because it is. The pandemic has influenced funding and one-time capital infusions, but the business of education has become harder. Budget decisions do reflect our values, and I am proud that the district took the opportunity to show gratitude to our faculty. I appreciate the hard work executed by Dr. Massetti and Mr. Manguala and team in reaching a 17.5% reserve, and I appreciate the board's understanding that we will still have to understand and address the underlying financial issues that plague the state of California, as well as our own district. I just want to clarify that reserves are for major unforeseen expenses and revenue shortfalls. So when presenting financials with projecting operating deficits in year 2 and 3, that constitute revenue shortfalls. And while I agree and applaud the one-time expenditure, this is a highly unusual circumstance. One-time monies coupled with strategic foundational work did afford us the ability to properly leverage those funds and create a deserved opportunity. But it does not negate the need for continued conservative approach to budgeting and resource allocation. Over the last couple of years, the district has had to make very difficult financial decisions, and we have continually stated that in doing such, it will be in the best interest of our students. It is in the best interest of our students to retain the best faculty. It is in the best interest of the faculty to know that we not only acknowledge the challenges that they have faced, but given the opportunity, we rewarded the work. Yet this does not change the narrative in our financial challenges. It is not easy to balance, but we have to, pardon me, my contacts. It is not easy to balance. We have to be fiscally responsible while valuing those that are the backbone of what we do. I don't want the optics to confuse anyone. As we consider the expiration of hold harmless and one-time funding, continued declining enrollment, even with the introduction of TK, COVID uncertainty and impact, and facility needs, there is financial fragility, a need to keep improved reserve levels, all while focusing on our students and managing the budget judiciously. In order to address achievement, we must have financial resources, and as we look to improve outcomes and enhance learning opportunities, we have to continue to remind ourselves that there is a price tag. It should not be at the expense of, but it should be in addition to, and that means staying committed to financial solvency.
Thank you.
Thinking of the work we've done over the past few years, it was very difficult. We had hundreds of people on Zoom meetings, mostly berating us. And going through this very hard time, we managed to come out the other side. And for now, things are looking good, but considering we're still looking good. But we have to remember that things can change. Trustee Water, turn on your mic. As for our population going down, which Trustee Gracia mentioned, it's not all the causes. We know some people are claiming because we're planning on closing a school that's causing everyone to go rushing off. I don't think that's quite true. I really believe that when the pandemic hit, a lot of people who were working in hospitality and restaurant work picked up and left and went somewhere else. Perhaps they went out to do more agricultural work, but because there was no safety net at the time and their jobs disappeared. We saw how quickly the food bank was overwhelmed and needed the National Guard to help them. And every week I read a perfectly hair-raising story either in our local paper or the New York Times about expensive real estate. And I have flyers left on my doorstep telling me how much a house in the neighborhood went for and urging me to list my house with them. And it's really daunting. I mean, it is very expensive to buy a house in this community. It just is. And 3 young people I know pooled forces and bought a house around the corner, a tiny little house on the corner, very, very well kept, but tiny. And it was in the high 6 figures. So this is why this, and I don't see it changing, really. I mean, I said earlier, we have a fatal proximity to the Golden Gate Bridge. A lot of wealthy people live that way. So I think we've been very, very responsible. We've been good stewards. I too am happy we can recognize our hardworking employees. And I think we're just going to have to, stay alert and pay attention, to all the signs. And that's it. Thank you very much, Mr. Mangala.
Thank you.
I agree with what my fellow trustees have said. I think, the hold harmless provision has been an opportunity for us to, through the difficult choices and the conservative approach, to shore up our reserve in the face of that kind of drop off the cliff when the hold harmless ends. You're not supposed to spend all the money you save during the hold harmless provision, and I think this presentation is reflective of that. We also have taken the opportunity during the distance learning time to also not spend the savings that we had, except on very valuable summer programs and the needs that have arisen during that time. So I applaud Mr. Manguala and his team for that, for the detailed work, and this board for the decision making in that respect. One of the questions I had, you talk about the TK enrollment being kind of a boon for in the face of that declining enrollment. Can you speak a little to how that might, what kind of increased costs we might see with TK, adding TK? It's not going to be it's not going to be only the benefits, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So the first part is we're determining what the number looks like. So we're looking at a number somewhere between, about the high would probably be about 180 additional students coming in via TK per year for the next 4 years, which would offset our decline enrollment. That's the very highest number. Could be as low as 100, right? So it does vary. And so in response to that, there'll be revenue that will come to the school district, but also you have all the hiring costs, you have all the teachers, you have the facilities related costs. And right now there's some unfunded mandates. For example, an ideal TK classroom has a bathroom, it has a play yard, is a certain size. So at this point, there's not enough funding to make all of that happen. So we need to watch that kind of closely. So we will have some facilities related costs to kind of set up all the schools where we plan to have our TKs optimal. So yes, you're correct. It's not just revenue coming in, it's revenue and expenses that come with it. And you're starting up a new program, which has additional one-time costs.
So I guess it's yet another reason to ensure that we have a reserve that's healthy, and then that we're continuing to observe and be good stewards, as Trustee Water mentioned, of of the programs and our funding. So thank you. Again, it's good news in the short term, and I think it's reflective of the policies and practices that this board is engaged in even before I got here. So thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Dooley.
Any other questions or comments? Sure, Trustee Ricer.
I would just like to thank Mr. Manguala for making such incredibly intricate and complicated topics so understandable. This is not my strong suit, and also to just point out for anyone that doesn't think about it this way, that you're asking, that the demands of a CBO are to balance a budget when the income stream is unstable. and the goalposts are moving all the time. So hats off to you, Mr. Mangwala, and to your team. I really want to raise another or surface another point, or bring it back again to on the table, is just to remind everyone that a few years ago, our reserve was 3.3%. And that we were 0.3% away from a state takeover and losing local control of our schools. So to go from 3.3% in 2018, was that 2018, to be to 17.19%, even if some of it is due to a year of virtual schooling during COVID and some saved operational costs, that is just a success to be celebrated. And I just want to, I echo all the well-articulated points made by my fellow trustees. I'm really grateful that this reserve and our financial picture allowed us to increase compensation and reward our hardworking teachers and staff throughout the district. That's incredibly important. And just the other number that stuck out to me as a layperson in finance is just that even though we've made that incredible, almost 14 percentage points increase in our reserve, we are still below the average for a unified district. So that's all to say that we need to continue on the track and the path of being conservative with our reserve. I think you did, Mr. Mangwala, a great job of highlighting how many of the factors that contributed to this higher than projected reserve or one-time reasons that we cannot count on. I think it's really important for the community to understand that one-time money does not fix our declining enrollment issue. And I want to echo what Trustee Waters said to Trustee Gracia's point. Yes, we're losing a lot of students, but this is a statewide problem, and it's actually a national problem. So I want to make sure that when we frame the ongoing challenge of declining enrollment, that we're clear that we as a district are not causing that declining enrollment problem, that is factors, well beyond our scope of influence. And as Trustee Water articulated, the cost of housing and the cost of living here in the Bay Area and the difficulty of getting by on a lot of the service industry jobs that are available here in our community all add up to it being tough to raise a family and stay here in the Napa Valley. So we know that our declining enrollment is an ongoing challenge, and that is part of that sort of ever-shifting goalpost of our finances, but that's not because we don't have our act together, and it's not because we aren't offering exceptional education here in our district. And lastly, I just want to say that, this stability, there may be a response from people hearing this report or reading it online that, well, how can we be, making cuts if we have so much money? And I just want to reiterate that it is in the interest of our district to be financially stable. And that point that Mr. Mangwala made that I wrote down, even though I already knew it and had read it and had heard him say it already, was just that it is that stability of its financial stability is what enables us to attract and retain high quality employees. It's what enables us to respond to the unexpected. It's what enables us to be thoughtful and precise when we have to make cuts instead of doing so under duress and under pressure because we're trying to avoid a state takeover. And I will mention again, I have before, I taught in a district that was taken over by the state, and we do not want to go there. So it's not good for teachers, it's not good for families, it's not good for students, it's not good for the quality of education that you can provide when you have a state person coming in to slash your budget. because they're not going to do it with the precision of a surgeon. They're going to do it with a chainsaw. So I just want to congratulate Mr. Manguala and his team and this board for the decisions made before I joined it, and for the way we have guided our, our theory of action is what's best for students, and what's best for students is fiscal stability. And I'm so glad that we are on our way, well on our way.
Thank you, Trustee Reiser.
Thank you. I had comments, but everything was well said. So thank you. I'm going to now ask if we have any public comment on this item, Mr. Bassinet.
We do have public comment. I'll allow Norma Ortiz.
Hello.
Yes, Ms. Ortiz, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I got disconnected twice during public comment. So in terms of, for reasons I'm unaware of, in terms of this particular item, according to current data and reports, with the decreased number of student enrollment for the academic school year 2021-2022, it would be nice that the Napa Valley Unified School District Board of Education please consider appointing a special committee as a backup plan to bring ideas to prevent any possibility of future school closures, and for the possibility that the community can contribute and further support in this aspect. I would like to see that. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next speaker.
That is all for public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Bassinet. All right, we are now moving forward to our next presentation, and this is under instructional services in regards to special education program review.
Ms. Padilla Jennings.
Oh yeah, Mr. Bassinet, thank you so much, Mr. Bassinet. Good evening again, President Gonzalez-Maras, board trustees, student board representatives, student board representative BIT, Dr. Mercetti, and the NVUSD community. Our presentation tonight will focus on the progress that has been made on implementing the recommendations from the Fiscal Crisis Management Team's report. Next slide, please. Tonight, you will hear from Terry Lynn Rossetti, the Executive Director of Special Education, and Sarah Knox, the Director of Prevention and Intervention, as they share the work that has been accomplished since the FICMAT study was completed during the 2016-2017 school year. We will start with an overview of the special education program to provide a sense of the scale and scope of our program. We will review the implementation of the 48 FICMAT recommendations. And then to finish the presentation, Director Knox will share how we are supporting students to remain in the least restrictive environment through the implementation of a multi-tiered system of support, also known as MTSS. She will also share the metrics that we will use to measure our progress this year. Now I would like to introduce Executive Director Terry Lynn Rossetti, who will share information about our special education programs. Next slide, please.
Thank you. The data collected here was based upon the count of students in the district and in special education as of December 1st each year. As you can see, although the general student population has decreased for Napa Valley Unified since 2015, the students eligible for special education services have continued to increase. Next slide, please. This has increased our percentage of students within the district eligible for special education. Typically, a district maintains a special education population of approximately 10 to 12%. While districts statewide are also experiencing an increase in their percentage of students eligible for services, this has been an area of concern within Napa Valley Unified School District since 2015. Next slide, please. It is important to keep in mind always that special education is a continuum of services. It is our mandate to always educate students in the least restrictive environment, meaning as close to the environment that their typically developing peers are educated in. With that being said, there is a continuum of services in place to support students with more intensive needs. With each step in the continuum to the more restrictive, the IEP team must review student progress data to ensure that all accommodations, modifications, and services have been implemented with fidelity prior to moving to a more restrictive setting. Next slide, please. Just as there is a continuum of service options, we also have a continuum of service delivery providers. Napa Valley Unified School District contracts with the County Office of Education to provide services for our preschool students, those aged 3 to 5. As students matriculate to TK or kindergarten, the district provides services to students until the age of 22 or until they earn their high school diploma, whichever comes first. For students that have exceptionally intensive needs, for which the district cannot provide an appropriate educational opportunity, we contract with non-public schools. Currently, Napa Valley Unified School District has only 15 students enrolled in non-public schools. Next slide, please. To determine eligibility for special education services, each area of suspected disability is assessed so that the IEP team can review to see if the student meets criteria for educational eligibility as having a disability. If so, goals are written in each area of need. Services are provided to address each goal. This slide documents the number of students currently receiving services in each area. To clarify, we have a total of 2,022 students currently receiving special education students in Napa Valley Unified. Some students are eligible for a single service, such as speech and language or academic instruction, while others are eligible for a variety of combinations of services, all dependent on their individual needs. The data presented here is gathered from SACE, our Special Education Information System. Napa Valley Unified utilizes this system, which is the most widely used special education management system in California, and it is supported by our SELPA. Next slide, please. This slide tracks the changes that have been made in staffing since the gathering of data for the FCMAT study to current date. The FCMAT study did address one area of staffing that was below the industry standard with our school psychologists, which is why you see an increase in that staffing area. Next slide, please. This graph illustrates the data gathered by the FCMAT study in 2016 in the area of classified special education support. These are our instructional assistants. At the time of the FCMAT study, there were 11 classifications of instructional support staff. Through our work with human resources and our bargaining unit, CSEA, this has been reorganized to a more manageable 4 classifications.
Thank you, Terry Lynn. I'll take it from here. FCMAT, as the Fiscal Crisis Management Team is called, was commissioned. Oh, next slide, please. Was commissioned in fall of 2016 to critically examine NVUSD's SPED program. FCMAT was charged with reviewing the effectiveness of our service delivery model. They looked at 3 areas: overall staffing, department organization, and the cost associated with the use of non-public schools, staffing agencies, and mediation. They analyzed special education teacher staffing ratios, class and caseload sizes, as well as examine the special education paraeducator staffing throughout the district. That's that classification that Director Rossetti talked about that went from 11 to 4. So now we have independence facilitators, IFs, para educators, and then IAPCs, and I'm missing one, Terry Lynn.
Adaptive Technology Instructional Assistant.
Thank you. They also reviewed the SPED department's staffing and organization. One of their primary functions was to determine how we can have greater efficiency in the use of special education funds to limit the contribution from the unrestricted general fund. Next slide, please. Executive Director Rossetti will share which recommendations have been completed since the FICMAT report was presented to the school board in the spring of 2017. Next slide, please.
There were a total of 48 recommendations that were broken into 7 categories. As of now, 18 of those recommendations, or 38% of the study, have been completed, with an additional 12 in progress. The first 6 categories outline the action items that, once completed, will impact the fiscal outcomes outlined in the 7th fiscal contribution. This chart shows the number that were completed. When we indicate that they were completed, they are done. Those that are indicated as being in process are those that we are working on between now and the end of September. In the next step categories are those that we will be working on in October and November of this year, with the remainder being completed in December through June. Next slide, please. In summarizing the items that have been completed, we have added special day classes for students with moderate disabilities at Willow Elementary School. A tracking system for caseloads that is systematic for the department has been developed. It is updated monthly and reviewed by special education, along with the assistant superintendents of business services, human resources, and curriculum and instruction. The board you see here in this photo, which was once the staffing tracker in special education, has now been transformed into a board where we celebrate the positive things that are happening at our school sites. Next slide, please. This has been replaced by the staffing tracker, of which this is an example of one of the pages. This document is live and it is shared between business services, human resources, technology, and managed by special education. Currently, the coordinators and supervisors of behavior services are meeting weekly with our counterparts in human resources to manage our staffing landscape and keep everyone on the same page. And as we staffed this year, we kept a close eye on our fiscal management, staffing down to the 0.1 FTE. Next slide, please. As we shared previously, working with human resources and CSEA, the instructional support staff in special education now fall within one of 4 job titles. Instructional support staff have also had a day added to their work calendar to allow for professional development. The district office administration was decreased by 4 positions at the end of the 2020 school year. Communication guidelines for responsiveness are reviewed annually with expectations that district office staff will respond in a timely manner to sites and our fellow departments. The clerical support staff member who supports the executive director manages the workflow of the clerical support staff in our office, and we have cross-trained on our positions to support our efficiency. Next slide, please. Monthly meetings are held with the clerical staff at the district office, as well as the special education clerical staff at the sites, so that troubleshooting can be addressed in a timely manner. The district office staff engaged in professional development to create more structured and task-oriented meetings. Through this work, our meetings have transformed. We start the day with a 5 to 15-minute check-in, and we meet weekly for our deeper discussions. The executive director maintains a tracking system for due process cases, including monitoring the costs. As of this moment, Napa Valley Unified does not have any outstanding cases or payments. Jan Tomsky from Fagan, Friedman, and Full Frost conducted a training for all site administrators in June of 2020 as an overview of positive practices for facilitating IEP meetings. Our SELPA resources are available to continue this training as we move forward. Next slide, please. The following recommendations are those that are in process. Next slide. A committee is being formed to review the continuum of services within the secondary special education programs with regards to caseload and services in the least restrictive environment, with a target of January 2022 for recommendations. A behavior-focused strike force has been developed to ensure that our independence plans are a part of all IEP meetings, or all IEPs that include services for site-based or individual support. The long-term goal of IDEA is to ensure equality of opportunity, full participation, independent living, and economic self-sufficiency for individuals with disabilities. Supporting students to maintain their independence through independence goals will not only support the district financially as we move forward, but also prepare our students to support themselves when they leave the school system. We will continue with our monthly meetings with the assistant superintendents of instructional services, business services, and human resources to further analyze our special education staffing. Next slide, please. The district staffing ratios for instructional support staff have been based on guidelines that were recreated in 2006. Although the district is near the industry norms for support staff assigned to teachers, we continue to examine our ratios and how support staff for site-based and intensive individual instruction are being managed. This leads to the work that the Behavior Strike Force is continuing to address the implementation of the assessments to determine the supports necessary for students to access education in the least restrictive environment. The focus of these assessments will be an environmental assessment, including teaching strategies, physical environment, and site resources with staff, so that we can determine the student needs and how to most effectively and efficiently support them. Next slide, please. The district office team is evaluating and reevaluating the procedures for communication both to and with sites to ensure that we are supporting students and families when needs arise. The focus on relationship building helps us to intervene when disagreements or misunderstandings arise. In addition, we continue our work with Parents Can, our local parent advocacy agency, to ensure that we are available to follow up with families who are experiencing concerns with their students' access to education. In this work with Parents Can, the executive director will work with the Community Advisory Committee and our SELPA to make sure that we continue to implement workshops for parents so that they can deepen their understanding of their procedural safeguards within the special education realm. As our new Executive Director of Business Services has come on board, I look forward to reestablishing our monthly meetings. Jenna and I have already scheduled those to review fiscal accountability on a regular basis. And over the next 2 years, the state is allocating funding to support alternative dispute resolution and learning recovery for students who are eligible for special education services. In the next few weeks, I will be learning more through our SELPA director with regards to the guidelines for this funding. At this time, it looks like Napa Valley Unified will be eligible for approximately $330,000 in the area of alternative dispute resolution and $1.5 million in the area of learning recovery. As we move on to the next slide, I'm going to pass the torch to Director Knox, who is going to talk about how we are supporting students in the least restrictive environment.
Thank you, Director Rossetti. Good evening, trustees, student board member Bitt, Dr. Massetti, and the NVUSD community. It's a pleasure to be here to present this evening. One of my roles as Director of Prevention and Intervention involves overseeing our multi-tiered system of support, which Trustee Reiser so eloquently spoke to earlier this evening. And she's just as passionate about it as I am, and really excited to let you know tonight about some of the updates and how that works really in concert with supporting the general instructional services spectrum of supports for students through a multi-tiered system of support and in concert with special education. And it really does help to answer the question that you see on this slide here, which is how are we supporting students to remain in the least restrictive environment in order for them to be successful? When all students, including students with the most extensive needs, are able to learn together and are given equitable and excellent instruction and support, they can participate, learn, and excel in grade level general education. They can build meaningful social relationships. They can achieve positive behavioral and social emotional outcomes, and they can graduate from high school, college, and beyond and be successful. So why is supporting students in the least restrictive environment important? Well, for many reasons, but to connect it with the presentation that Director Rossetti just made, the special education subgroup is our lowest performing subgroup, but its enrollment is growing the fastest. So as she mentioned, special education referrals have spiked. We are over-identifying students with mild to moderate disabilities for special education services while simultaneously seeing a drop in their academic performance and graduation rates. And these are just some statistics around performance of students in special education and implications. Some of them do not graduate. Spending on per student in special education is 3 times more than spending per student in general education. And as we spoke about during the board advisory meeting, it is an encroachment, even though I know Trustee Water doesn't like that word. It's an encroachment on the general fund when we have to spend the additional amount of dollars per student for special education services. There is a 7.5% exit rate, which means that when students enter special education, they likely never exit. 75% of the students in special education are considered mild to moderate, which means that they're not severely disabled and could likely have their needs met in the general ed setting. And then lastly, teachers are not equipped with pre-referral strategies, and so special education has become that de facto remedial program for students. Next slide, please. So as Trustee Reiser alluded to earlier, we have developed a multi-tiered system of support handbook and reference guide for our staff. And this guide is really an effort to bring equity and consistency to how students qualify for and receive academic, behavioral, and social emotional intervention services across our schools in grades TK through 12. So this guide outlines what indicators we use to identify the level of intervention that students should receive within that multi-tiered system of support. And it describes the supports that should be utilized at each of the different tiers of intervention. As Trustee Reiser also mentioned, currently in development are our MTSS maps, which will be a corresponding tool to this guide. They're designed by grade bands across 2 areas, academic and social emotional behavioral. And these maps will be easy to read, visual, 1-page guides that can be used by teachers, support staff, parents, and students in order to identify the resources and supports available to all students in the Napa Valley Unified School District. Next slide, please. So this diagram shows a progression a student might take within our multi-tiered system of support, from starting with the least restrictive general education environment, the smallest part of the arrow there, to the most restrictive environment where the arrow is larger. So really the point of MTSS is to respond to students' needs and their response to the interventions they receive at each step along the way, all while continuing to deliver high quality core universal instruction to them throughout that process. So if our students are receiving high quality, high leverage practices, high quality evidence-based practices to support students at the tier 1, then 80% of our students should be successful. And the focus at that tier 1 level is on prevention, on early intervention at the classroom level or the least restrictive environment, and also while providing enrichment opportunities for advanced students who need acceleration. At the tier 2 level, 15% or fewer of our students might need, so some of our students might need additional scoops. They might need smaller groups. They might need tier 2 interventions and supports that would then be progress monitored and delivered by someone outside of the general education classroom, such as an interventionist, maybe a social worker, a counselor, outside providers, tutors. Those are things that might happen at the tier 2 level. And that for a student to get to the tier 2 level, that would be done through universal screening identification, through a teacher referral in ARIES, or through a parent request and meeting that subsequently leads to some deeper diving with data that leads placement at the tier 2 level. But the MTSS team is the driver of the placement for students. At the very top is tier 3, which is fewer than 5% or a few of our students within this system. And that's evidence-based, accelerated, intensive intervention for a few students based on needs according to data. Students are going to continue to have access to the core instruction even at this top tier when possible, and it involves frequent progress monitoring, possible alternative placement at this level, outside providers, and our school psychologists, interventionists, counselors, social workers, all teaming to determine what's going to be the best fit in terms of supports and services for students at tier 3. Beyond MTSS, then, if students, we've exhausted all of our strategies in the general education setting, students are not making progress. At that point, the team, the MTSS team, might determine that a referral for special education is appropriate at that time. And so they will have a discussion, or they would work with the special education team at the site to put together an assessment plan if that's appropriate, or if it's appropriate, discuss the possibility of 504 plan or accommodations for a student. Next slide, please. So our metrics that we are using to determine success with our multi-tiered system of support for 2021 and 2022 are the implementation of this handbook that we discussed earlier, and our intervention maps, or MTSS maps. As Trustee Reiser described in detail earlier, couldn't have said it better myself. We are tracking interventions in ARIES through a pre-referral process, as well as an intervention tracking and progress monitoring process in ARIES this year in order to streamline that process and make it really efficient for everyone involved. We are looking to see improvements on our STAR universal screening for students assigned targeted intervention. So we'd like to see them moving the needle and making progress if they are placed in a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention. And we have actually at this point completed district-wide training for all of the people on the MTSS team, administrators, counselors, social workers, MTSS leads, and we will have completed district-wide training for all of our teachers by the end of September on Tier 1 interventions, and that's being led by the site administrators and site MTSS leads. Lastly, another metric that we would be using to measure success is the fiscal efficiency of our resources allocated to special education services, so a reduction in the encroachment. And that concludes our report.
Thank you so much, Director Knox and Director Rossetti. And if our metrics look familiar, they are taken from the success indicators for the board annual priority. That's where they came from, and that's our way of determining how successful we are in meeting this board priority. And that concludes our presentation, and we're open for questions.
Great, thank you. Let's start with Trustee Gracia.
I have several comments and questions. First, I look forward to viewing those visual one-page guides that you intend to make available to teachers, and am supportive of these visual maps. I just hope that you don't adopt the Mike Pearson approach of making the font so small as to be unreadable in order to fit the entire document on a single page. Having said that, you have reported tonight that the district has been concerned with SPED increases and operations since 2015. Given that concern, why were so few recommendations, a mere 38%, implemented over the 4 years since this FCMAT report was initially presented to the board?
Trustee, thank you, Trustee Gracia. I'll answer that. If you look at the recommendations that were implemented, it's probably some of the heavier lift items that needed to be in place for us to make progress on the other recommendations. I remember what and also in just reading the FCMAT report and the picture that it paints of the functioning of our special education department, it's very telling that there was a lot of work to be done just to keep track of who are employees and what site are they located at. And we're talking pretty basic organizational monitoring. And so that work was critical to do those basically the first 2 years, is really tracking and making sure that we knew who the staff were, what they were, what assignment they had, and monitoring their work. And so that work was done during those first 2 years. There was also some of the work in terms of there was lots of questions around whether we were following a full inclusion model, because that was one of the sort of tasks that was asked of them, is to look at if our service delivery model around full inclusion was really being effective. And the reality is we're not really a full inclusion district. We're sort of in this weird, wonky middle space. And so part of the work that has been done is the creation of classes that to serve some of our students who have some more intensive needs, which we didn't have. All students were sort of in the general ed with a lot of extra support that came with them. So that work was done in those first sort of 2 years. And then we also had, the last year and a half is, the pandemic, which delayed some of the work and paused it, because our special education team spent a tremendous amount of time making sure figuring out how to deliver services to students virtually during the pandemic. And they really did an exceptional job. So lots of effort made those first 2 years just to get the department straight and right in terms of the communication. And then clearly there's more work to be done.
4 years to implement a sub 40% FCMAT implementation recommendation still to be unacceptable. I just can't believe that it takes 4 years to get to 38%. I'm struggling with that, but I'll move on. Considering the dire financial circumstances that the district continues to find itself in due to declining enrollment, why were the fiscal solutions delayed so long to the final tier of implementation?
I don't know if Director Rossetti, because I know she took over the reins in 2017, and she can speak a little bit to sort of what she was directed and what things were told to her that were important to have in place.
Absolutely. Thank you. When I look at the FCMAT study, everything leads into the fiscal writing of the district as far as our department goes. So the work that we're doing in the first priorities or the first areas really will lead to the changes in our fiscal management. I have continued to work with our business services department to establish monthly meetings so that we can continue to work together on implementing those changes. I just can't call them as complete right now. They are things that I have continued to work with.
And I'd also like to add, if you look at the data points, one of the biggest sort of expenses that we had fiscally was around the use of our paraprofessionals. And when you look at the numbers of paraprofessionals we had over the last 4 years, the numbers have actually gone down, even given the rise in the number of students we have that we're serving. So, I mean, there has been efforts made, especially in our contracting services cost. We were using non-public agencies for some of our independence facilitators, and you'll see that the numbers have significantly dropped from prior years.
And how much longer do you anticipate it will take for full implementation of the FCMAT recommendations? Our
goal is the end of this school year, June, to have completed all 48 recommendations. You know, I'm going to put a little caveat in there. As long as the pandemic doesn't cause school closures, then that might delay our work a little bit. But the goal is to have it done. I agree with you. From 2017 to present, more could have been done.
Can I jump in before there's another inquiry just really quickly? So I do want, I am going into my 4th year. And so I appreciate Trustee Gracia's inquiries sort of regarding, urgency in terms of the response when you commission a study like FCMAT. The bottom line is when you commission a FCMAT study, there really does need to be accountability, and there needs to be accountability from the superintendent on down. And I have worked with FCMAT studies in the past. I know how to build that accountability. Given the multitude of issues that I needed to lean into as the new superintendent, recognizing that there was a FCMAT study out there. There were just so many issues in terms of, the work that we had to do to get to the last presentation outcomes that we just described. This was one of them. And so what you have from me today, given where we are today and what's been accomplished thus far and why this is in the board annual priorities, is that now we have the bandwidth, the focus, and the time to focus on it and have that accountability. So that is why it is here in the board priorities, because now the accountability will be there. It's nested in the priorities. What does that mean? There's accountability from the trustees. If there's accountabilities with the trustees, there's accountability from the superintendent. So a special, in my professional experience in doing this work, and a couple of rounds of it, in terms of improving special education services while also looking at cost containment, because we know it's underfunded, and we know that's sort of a whole other topic, is just the importance of it being an area of focus, and that's what we're doing now. And so you have sort of my commitment from that, for that commitment from my office, which I think in my past experience, a special education director alone cannot do the work. Like it takes the kind of systemic, comprehensive response and approach that we've really done with everything to be able to accomplish the execution of those findings. And so that's what you have before you today. And that's why it's coming to the board in this way, so that we can start that ongoing dialogue. Through the ongoing dialogue, you're building in the accountability infrastructure that we need in order to get the work done.
Will we then have a follow-up at the end of this year to see the progress that's been made?
Oh, absolutely. So as we have built in through the board priorities being part of my performance evaluation. I think we've made that very clear internally to the organization and the public. You will get status checks on all board annual priorities. And given that you nested this in the board annual priorities, you will definitely be getting reports on progress and whether we're hitting the success indicators that I know you're all seeking.
And Dr. Massetti, just to comment on that, the FCMAT update will be part of the board advisory committee on curriculum and student support. So it'll be an ongoing standing item. So there'll be monthly updates regarding the progress being made.
And then I know there may be more trustee comments and questions, but I will plant this seed right now, just again, having done, have had previous experience with FCMAT reports and their implementation. You know, we have brought in strategic, top-notch professional consultation around a variety of issues in order to get the results that we've attained over the course of the last 3 years during my tenure as superintendent. And that may be something that we need to consider. The lift around redesign of special education, coupled with a strategy around cost containment at times might need some strategic consultation. So I may be making some recommendations and advising on that to Assistant Superintendent Andrew Jennings and Director Rossetti potentially, because sometimes this is a very hard work and you need some of that external thought partnership. So don't be surprised if you potentially see that in a future board meeting as we look to really, dig into the execution of FCMAT. Again, a special education director alone cannot accomplish what is in that FCMAT study. So it'll take the system, it'll take a comprehensive approach from the system, along with potential strategic consultation.
Well, I appreciate the deep dive. It is apparent that a great deal of work has been accomplished, and you have well articulated and defined the work that needs to be completed. This is an extensive process complicated by a vast array of variables. We, like the majority of school districts throughout the state, face an ongoing challenge in funding the costs. There are continuing increases in the difference between the federal and state government funding received and the mandated costs for these student services. I had an exchange with someone I respect on this topic, and his comments were twofold. The first was that to effectively address staffing, we must address the delivery model, and you are doing that. And the current statewide SELPA formula doesn't fairly reflect changing SPED populations, either in severity or percentage of the student body, coupled with shrinking districts, but I suppose that is a discussion for another time. That said, many of the FCMAT recommendations appear to be centered on staffing and position control and reconciliation. The staffing tracker and organizational structure review seems paramount to the work being done. And I appreciate the cross-pollination of special education, the business office, and human resources. This trifecta will create an additional level of transparency and accountability, as well as critical information for budgeting and student support. I reviewed the original FCMAT report with all of the recommendations, and there is supportive reasoning behind each recommendation and in great detail. So I cross-referenced to understand the work as it was originally stated and our interpretation of those requests a few years later. We are on task with how we define our objectives and where we see the need for improvement or modification. The template for what needs to be done was clearly crafted, as there are 36 pages of content with that defined direction. And Trustee Gracia, that was in my next paragraph, was to understand timelines. So I will delete that. But the crux of the work is impact. What is the benefit? The completion of these recommendations is not what makes this process meaningful. It is a necessary component, but is the effect that is essential. For example, both in the FCMAT and in your presentation, staffing ratios were addressed. The staffing ratios both increased and decreased based on the specific position, and those stats were highlighted in your bar graphs. So what was the economic impact of that restructuring? Is it more financially efficient? How has it impacted students? And is the process different than what had been executed previously? And if so, to what benefit? I'm not asking you to answer those questions in this moment, but I would like, if possible, for this type of analysis to be included in the next presentation so that we do understand impact and value. You are creating a more efficient system that will best serve our students, and I see that happening. You've defined the process, and I look forward to the progress report and hopefully much more frequently. Thank you for the work you've put in and that to come.
I think I saw Trustee Dooley's hand before. Yeah. Go ahead,
Yes,
Trustee
thank
Dooley.
you. I had a couple points and a couple questions. The model of the continuum of services and the kind of extended version, including the multi-tiered system of support, they're depicted on here as kind of arrows pointing from least restrictive to most restrictive. And I do understand that. And we have the kind of the process by which the more restrictive services are implemented. I do, are those arrows aren't supposed to be one directional, right? Are we, I mean, they often end up that way. We saw on the one slide that there's only a 7.5% rate of exiting from special education services. But is that and I guess that this was kind of triggered by Trustee Jankowicz's comment about what the impact of this process is going to be. Obviously, our goal is to provide the services that are needed, that each student needs to gain an education that we guarantee to all students. Is there is part of the goal to move students as much as possible from those more restrictive services down to the least restrictive? Is that an appropriate expression of the goal?
Director Massetti, do you
It's a
want to?
great question. Can you all answer that? The instructional team, it's a brilliant question.
I can answer that. And the answer is yes. Our goal always is to, it's a balance in special education between remediation and accommodation. We want to make sure that we are remediating to the maximum extent possible to help a student get back to being able to access their education with their age appropriate peers, with accommodations if necessary. And you are correct that the arrow often does just look like it goes to the more restrictive, but our goal is to also return students to lesser restrictive settings and hopefully back to the general education environment.
And just
go ahead.
Sorry, and just to echo from the general education side with MTSS, the goal is with each tier to address the concern at that tier, and then if an additional layer is needed, to progress monitor it so that once it's no longer needed, then there's a clear exit criteria to then remove that additional support off of the student's plan that they're receiving, so that then again they're just receiving the tier one and that extra support that they're getting at the classroom level from the teacher, just at the tier one level. And the same thing goes for, if a student doesn't respond at tier two, we add on something at tier three with, again, the clear exit criteria, clear entry and exit criteria. So then once it's no longer needed, then that falls off, but they're still always getting access to the core, always getting access to learning with all of their peers, their grade level peers. So I hope that clarifies a little bit.
It does, thank you. And I think it highlights the iterative process that is required at every step here, that we're not just kind of slotting students into a place where we're continually assessing and addressing needs and that requires an extensive but efficient staff and interaction with parents, and the program needs to have that efficiency in order to make that iterative process meaningful. The other,
Really, can I add just a bit to that? In addition to the FCMAT recommendations, our program specialists in special education have been doing a deep dive look into exactly what our services look like and taking a hard look at the data that is being collected by our education specialists from K through age 22, so that we can be clear that our services are meaningful and targeted to the students' needs to increase that impact of that remediation.
Thank you. The last thing I'd like to say, it really has to do with how we as a board are kind of overseeing this. And as we get these reports and you know, I definitely recognize and agree with the urgency of doing this. I don't know that it's accurate to say that only 38% of the recommendations have been addressed. I think, you know, if we equally weigh each recommendation as one out of the total number, then yes. But as I think Assistant Superintendent Andrew Jennings mentioned, there was a lot of heavy lifting in the ones that were addressed. And you know, if we were to look at a construction project progress map, you know, the way those are designed is to kind of to appropriately weigh the amount of work that's been done against the, you know, regardless of how many kind of progress points there are. So I just, as we move forward, I want to make sure that we're kind of appropriately weighing the work that has been done. That's not at all to say that we couldn't be further along and we couldn't be at a, you know, addressing a lot of these earlier than we are, but I just want to be clear-eyed when we do review the progress going forward.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I agree with you, and I appreciate this. And you know, I heard a lot of it at the curriculum meeting. And right, I don't want to sound all cold-hearted and you know, refer to, you know, encroaching, you know, when we're talking about, you know, human beings, but it's an expensive program. And now if you turn to pages 15 and 16, you don't even have to read it, just the visually will tell you what's been completed. Look at instructional assistant staffing, 3 bullets. Drop down, look at due process and mediation. This is actually very important. 2 bullets. And then look at organizational structure, 8 bullets. And that tells you right there that there's just, you know, there's a little certain amount of inertia there, you know, and it's, you know, hard to move forward. I mean, you know, they told us that there was, they're trying to, you know, streamline the bureaucracy, and everyone who's ever worked in special ed has told me that it is famous for bureaucracy and lots of paperwork. Lots and lots of paperwork. So I think, you know, there it is. And we're moving forward. I appreciate this. I like the fact that you're trying to, you know, organize the MTSS handbook. I look forward to reading it. You know, you're trying to create a system here that everyone will understand, and good. Let's do that and not forget that we're dealing with human beings. And, you know, I support this report. Thank you.
Yeah, not to mention that 2 school years have been impacted with the pandemic.
Right. Yeah,
that's kept us pretty busy.
It kind of took
just a little bit.
It took the starch out of a few of us.
Yeah.
I mean, and, you know, I was just thinking, you know, I've been here almost 3 years. It seems like 300 some days, and other days it feels like 3 months, you know, but David, we've been here for almost 3 years. It's incredible. And it's just been so much fun. But I appreciate this report. Yeah, thank you.
Lowercase,
I appreciate the
fun.
candor.
Lowercase f. Thank you, Trustee Waters. Trustee Chu.
So I had similar comments about the least restrictive environment and how we can get our kids there, and how effective it is to go to work towards that. So I have a couple of questions, just clarifying questions about that. I guess the first thing is, what kind of supports do you give teachers who are actually going to be receiving these kids in a general education setting? Are we providing sufficient professional development for them to be able to accommodate that in their classroom?
That's great.
Director Rossetti, did you want to share a little bit about Camp SPED and then some of our other efforts to support teachers and learning how to work with students who might have some special needs?
Absolutely. In the summer of 2019, we were able to host Camp SPED, 3 days of professional development for general education staff, where we supported our general education teachers in learning about accommodations, modifications, disability awareness, how to effectively use instructional support staff who may be in your room, as well as just some skills for when you attend IEP meetings. And it was fabulous. And we filled room 205 upstairs, which is our larger room. But that was back when we could fill the room. We had planned to repeat that experience in the summer of 2020, but clearly we were unable to do so. And our professional development kind of shifted to more of what we needed during the pandemic. We do continue to provide ongoing professional development at our professional development days, as well as anytime a site can invite us to come to a staff meeting, we are there. And we have offered after school or weekend courses to help support our general education teachers.
Great. Good to hear. My other question related to this is, how do we support the students as they matriculate from elementary school to middle school through high school? Because I think that's going to also inform how well our system has supported their needs.
Absolutely. We start thinking about those matriculations about now in September. As open enrollment begins, we start with supporting families. So there is a matriculation night held by our coordinators, one for elementary to middle school and one for middle school to high school. Also another one for those matriculating up from the county program, the preschool program into kinder. So that we can answer questions for families even before we get to the steps for students. In January, our coordinators begin gathering information on students who will be matriculating for planning purposes. And in May, we have all teachers from elementary will meet with the middle school teachers, and the middle school special education teachers meet with the high school, so that student-specific information can be shared. You know, those little tricks that the previous teacher had that helped students to make sure that they're more successful as they matriculate up. We do tours for students who ask for it. You know, they are always eligible to go to the general education tours, but we do more specific tours, particularly for the students that we know need that preview. And we're always out at the sites those first couple of weeks to make sure that if we find anybody wandering the halls of a middle school or high school, that we can help direct them supportively to the place they need to be.
Great. I guess my last comment is I'm really encouraged by the MTSS work that you guys are doing about how you can incorporate into ARIES, because I think if that can go with the students as they're going from grade to grade, teachers to teachers, I think that will go a long way. Is this information accessible to parents so they can have an understanding of the progress that their kids are making?
I can speak to that, Trustee Chu. Yes, the parents will be able to, they've always been able to see the intervention tab and through the parent portal, and will continue to do so. The difference now is that that tab previous to this year and to this this implementation or this new process that we're using has been kind of a clearinghouse for any kind of parent outreach or it was kind of a catch-all for different kinds of communication. So now moving forward, it will only be used by the MTSS team and administrators to document true tier 2 and tier 3 interventions that the student is receiving. There will be progress monitoring for each one of those interventions. And they'll be able to see status updates. In addition, the parents will be listed as stakeholders for each intervention. And so they'll get an automatic email through ARIES letting them know when an intervention has been put into place and what the goals are for that intervention.
Okay. Is there going to be some training for the parents to kind of navigate ARIES to be able to see this? I know last year and the year before, the district has been doing these parent education series. I think this would be great for the parents to understand how ARIES is evolving to suit the needs of our children, our students. I think it's a great, direction that we're headed. I think that's, looking forward definitely to the updates at the end of the school year. Thank you very much for the report.
It's a great idea.
I do think that that is critical. And as soon as we start to see users, entering things into ARIES for parents to be able to check in on, we want to make sure that we do adequate training for our parents to make sure they know how to navigate it and continue to advocate for their children. So thank you for that.
Okay, Trustee Reiser.
Yeah, I don't have much to add in terms of comments. I just wanted to thank Director Rossetti and Director Knox and Assistant Superintendent Andrew Jennings for taking this on. I understand when you look, there was one of the pages in the PowerPoint that listed the different kinds of staffing services that are covered in the special ed department. It just, every time I think about it, it hits me what an incredibly complex and broad array of needs you are meeting when you do your work. And I was reminded again in the presentation that it's not a K-12, it's a K to age 22 span of students that you're serving. So that is an incredibly challenging and complex undertaking and mission that you take on. And it's really clear from this report how diligently you've focused on efficiency. I understand with that broad array of needs and ages, how you would end up with sort of a runaway train of staffing and sort of a confusing patchwork of titles and aid categories, because what a broad array of needs and student services that you have to provide. So it just seems like, despite the numeric, 38%, it seems to me that you have really made incredible strides here, looking at the organization from 30,000 feet, looking at the way you're doing things. I can understand why you would need a year period or many months of period to look at actually what's happening and gather data, because we're a data-driven organization, to gather the data and the observation that you need to really get a clear handle on where you were starting in implementing those FCMAT recommendations. So really just thank you, and I appreciate the hard work. And I guess my last comment that I wanted to make, again, to cheerlead for the MTSS new rollout is, when Director Knox said, first of all, you made the comment about we have a real over-identification problem. And it's just crystal clear to me that this MTSS system that you have innovated and the tracking in ARIES is going to help with that. And then the other comment Director Knox made about how one of the things that can feed into the over-identification is the sense from the general classroom teacher that they don't feel equipped to meet the needs of special ed students that are within their classroom. And I think also this MTSS program is going to give teachers more tools and more confidence to know that they know what to do. Because even within, a general ed grade level classroom, you have an incredibly complex array and span of needs and abilities and things that you're juggling as a general ed teacher. So I really think that general ed teachers are going to be really supported and helped by the toolkits and the consistency that this MTSS program is going to provide them, and really help us with that, goal that we all need to keep in front of mind, which is to keep kids in the least restrictive environment. So just great work, and my hat's off to you. Thanks so much.
Before we continue, we do need to extend our meeting because it's past 10:30. Can I get a motion?
Move to extend till 1.
Second.
We're not going to go to 1, but thank you, trustee. Yeah, just making sure we don't interrupt, I guess, our conversations. I'm sorry, there was a first and a second by trustee Dooley. Student board rep?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose or abstain? I abstain. No, just kidding, but yeah, move forward with that. Okay. All right, so I think we've covered everybody's questions and comments. Yep, okay. Now it's, I'd like to check with Mr. Bassinet if we have any public comment.
We do have public comment. First attendee will be Norma Ortiz.
Hi, it's always nice to see more tutoring and instructional services and supports to accommodate the academic interventions when and where needed. This includes the appropriate response to increasing student needs. If I understood with the presentation of the information related to this item, the Napa Valley Unified School District Special Education Department has not had any due process hearings for this particular school year. So great job to that for in terms of that to our director Terry Lynn. Also, the Napa Valley Unified School District Board, I would like as a comment to please continue to financially support our special education department with quality and services for the students, for student success, for the best student success outcome under the present budget scenarios. Also, with this said, I urge the board to please do their best to continue focusing in innovative practices in terms of allocating sufficient funding to our special education department for those students in most need, especially to those special needs students who could have gone backward in development despite the areas or goals during the pandemic. In this instance, with the loss of learning and academic skills and regression. Also with another comment in terms of the report, I would like to see also more attention and training for the purpose of the aspect of under identification. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Next speaker.
There is no further comment.
Thank you, Mr. Bassinet. Okay, well, that concludes our section of presentations and discussion. Thank you to the presentation and for your time on this. Very much so. I think we all did our role of board member really to be informed in the area and continue to fully understand the complexity of it. So thank you for your time on that.
You're welcome. Thank you, trustees.
Okay, we are now going on to item K, which is our action items. Starting with item K1A, this is adoption of CSBA recommended March 2021 policy updates.
So moved.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Water. Student board rep.
Aye.
And let me go back to Mr. Bassinet. Do I have any public comment on this item?
We have no public comment for this item.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody oppose or abstain? Motion passes. Item K1B, adoption of California School Boards Association recommended June 2021 policy updates.
So moved.
Second.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Dooley. Do I have public comment on this item?
There is no public comment for this item.
Student board rep?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any oppose or abstain? Thank you. Items K2A, unaudited actual report.
So moved.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Jankowicz. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment for this item.
Student board rep?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. This is item K2B. This is resolution 2201. It's an adoption. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment for this item.
Okay.
Move to approve.
First by trustee Gracia,
Second.
second by trustee Dooley. Vera, if you could take roll call, please.
Yes, student board member,
Aye.
trustee Gonzalez Mares,
Aye.
trustee Jankowicz,
Aye.
trustee Gracia,
Aye.
trustee Ricer,
Aye.
trustee Water,
Aye.
trustee Shu,
Aye.
trustee Dooley.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vera. We're now going to item K2C. This is AB 1200-2756 for NVA, NAPS management and confidential.
Move to approve.
Second.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Dooley. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment for this item.
Student board rep?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any oppose or abstain? Okay. It's a good motion to pass. Thank you. All right, so now going on to item K3A. This is approval of MOU with formula salary increase for fiscal year 2021, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Dooley. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment for this item.
Thank you, Mr. Bassinet. Student board rep?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? Motion passes. Thank you. Now item K3B, approval of employee agreement amendments for executive cabinet.
So moved.
Second.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Dooley. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment for this item.
Thank you. Student board rep?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstain? Motion passes. All right, that was a good slate of voting there. A lot of hard work to get us there. Okay, instructional services, K4A, this is a ratification of MOU between NCOE and Napa Valley Unified School District.
So moved.
Second.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Dooley. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment for this item.
Thank you. Student Board Rep,
Aye.
all those in favor? Oppose or abstain? Thank you. Item K4B, MOU between News Domestic Violence and Sexual Abuse Services and Napa Valley Unified School District.
So moved.
Second.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Dooley. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment for this item.
Student Board Rep,
Aye.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Would you oppose or abstain? Thank you. K4C, MOU between On the Move and Napa Valley Unified School District.
So moved.
Second.
First by trustee Gracia, a second by trustee Riser. Do I have any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment for this item.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Bassinet. Student Board Rep,
Aye.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Oppose or abstain? Motion passes. Thank you. Item K5A, this is maintenance and operation request for disposition of surplus assets.
So moved.
I'll second.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Chu. Do I have public comment?
There is no public comment for this item.
Thank you. Student Board Rep,
Aye.
all those in favor? Abstain or oppose? Thank you. Item K6A, this is SPC number 12.31-20, request to call for bids for the Vintage High School Tennis Courts Replacement Project.
So moved.
I'll second.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Chu. Student Board Rep,
Aye.
and let me check if we have public comment on this item.
There's no public comment for this item.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody oppose or abstain? Great, thank you. Item K6B, SPC number 16.32-17, request for contract with Gates and Associates to provide design services for phase 3 of the district-wide fencing project.
So moved.
Second.
First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Riser. Do I have public comment?
There is no public comment for this item.
Student Board Rep,
Aye.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody oppose or abstain? Motion passes. All right, we are done with our action items. So going into informational. Under business services, the enrollment report. I think we've been
Yeah,
addressing that for quite some time, but
I like the addition of the projections that we've had.
Yeah, that was nice.
Connecting that with our actuals is helpful for context.
Mhm.
Did you capture that feedback, Assistant Superintendent Mangwala?
I did. Thank you so much for that feedback. We will continue to keep the projection next to it.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Now our local control and accountability plan and our LCFF budget overview for the parents amendment.
I just have one comment for trustee Water. After kind of going through it, I just wanted to give you a little fun fact that might make you a little bit happy. California ranks 4th in the nation with a 32.4% of 2020 graduates scoring a 3 or higher on the AP exam. The national average 3 or higher on the AP exam 2020 is 24.4%. And we at NVUSD outperformed both at 44.32%. So I wanted you to know. I know it's not where you want to be, but I thought those stats were interesting and spoke to our continued commitment of improving the program.
I think the year 2020 is one that is going to be unique, at least I hope. I mean, I'm glad we're doing better than everybody else.
I know, but we're headed in the right direction, and it's about forward movement.
So I do, for the trustees, trustee Riser, Water, and Gracia, who sit on the curriculum and student support advisory committee, this data point that we're extracting from this informational item related to the LCAP I did speak to Assistant Superintendent Pat Andrew Jennings today. So that was a request in committee to look at the College Board data. So Dr. Peter Aboud has been working with the instructional team. We will likely bring that to the October meeting.
Right.
Okay.
You know, it is remarkable though. I'm thinking of how last year was COVID and then the year before that it was cheating scandals. Pay to play, that sort of.
At least they're reporting stats on 3 or higher and not the. At least the stats are on performance 3 or higher and not on the number of students participating. So we've made progress.
Yeah, it's really. I think the
Okay, thank you. Additional suggestions and comments from board members and superintendent? Yes.
Well, I too was in the hospital.
You have your microphone on.
I too was in the hospital a few weeks ago. Nothing as dramatic as our fearless leader. I was really disappointed not to get those great punk staples, but I spent one night in San Francisco Kaiser, I had a heart procedure done and now I can run up a flight of stairs and, correcting a heart murmur. It wasn't, life-threatening. However, when I was there, I couldn't see anyone in my family. Not that I wanted to see them. I'm not that needy and I look pretty bad. I look terrible. And, but other people like to have their family visit them in the hospital and they were bummed out. I had a roommate and I'll tell you, the hospital was packed with COVID patients and the nurses were showing the strain. People were working double shifts. I observed nurses, these people are good. They're like hopping in, filling a need, seeing who needed help. They're really quite a good team, but they were so stressed out. And this is all driven by people who are not vaccinated. So I am going to add my voice to the chorus and say, get the vaccine. If you get sick and don't recover, there are people who are going to miss you. So get the vaccine. Help us all out here. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Water. And I'm glad you shared because I wasn't sure we could share our concern for your health too, until you made it public. But we're also, just to add of what those couple of weeks meant, just there's a lot going on here.
Another champ in the room.
Another champ in the
right.
room. And so we were rooting for you. And then at the same time.
I know you were.
Good,
That's what got me through.
And
good.
Trustee Water, I couldn't help. I shared this with my full cabinet on Tuesday, just also kind of being in the hospital and watching all the folks that work in the hospital and what they've been through and are continuing to persist through. And I couldn't help but relate it to the work that we do and just thinking about as we serve in our TK-12 environment, all the potential nurses and doctors and just wanting to and people support staff at hospitals and just wanting to deliver excellence in education because they're so needed. And I know that we have future brilliant minds. You're in the medical world and it's such a blend of art and science and it just requires something so special. And I know they're sitting in our classrooms and wanting to open avenues of opportunity for them. To find their gift and passion because it's so needed, saving lives. So we save lives too, hospitals and schools.
Yeah. It's the anniversary of the passing of a family member of mine that died from COVID. The vaccine wasn't available. He would have put it on, I'm sure. Just how it goes, right? And I had a tetanus shot and it hurt. It reminded me that I'm grateful that I have the tetanus shot because I hadn't had it and I was in pain for a couple of days. I was like, I think people forget that we have other vaccines that have saved us. you know, it's just emotional. Just hopefully people navigate through that emotion and do what's right. All right, future agenda items.
I did have one comment.
Oh, yeah,
before
go
we-
ahead, trustee Gracia.
Mine is less vaccine-y and more supply chain related. I'm hoping that the nacho cheese is not one of the items that is supply constrained so that my daughter can continue to eat the nachos at school lunch.
Plug for the
I
nacho.
would like to, at some point, have the Ed Foundation come. I would at some point like the Ed Foundation to come to give us an update after the merger with Napa Learns and what their focus is and what they're doing. I know they're expanding. And so I would, when appropriate, and we're not focusing on a lot of these other things, I would love to invite them to the podium.
I'll log that request, trustee Jenkwitz. Thank you.
I have a request as well. So I recently got wind of a survey that Napa Valley College is sending around to high school students in American Canyon about what classes they would like to see on campus, because we do have some classrooms reserved for NVC. So I was thinking, you know, how do NVC classes kind of tie into like our honors classes or our AP classes? And, you know, in some ways, it's probably the ALPS identified kids that kind of funnel through to take a lot of those classes as well. So I was wondering if we can get some sort of presentation or study session or something about how the district is doing with gifted programs like ALPS and offerings of honors programs and AP classes, and what happens in middle school, because I only see math as the only acceleration there, and I don't know what other things are available. So I was wondering if we can kind of have
I'm actually, your request is noted, but it's already technically scheduled and calendared. Assistant Superintendent Pat Andrew Jennings, please, I could look it up. It would take a minute, but we are planning a presentation on college and career, and that would be nested. The information request by trustee Chu would be nested in that presentation, correct?
I believe, yes, I believe it's scheduled for January.
January,
Because we've been doing
perfect.
some work bringing all of our college and career partners together so that we can do a better job of aligning our resources to support our students in that transition after high school. And then to speak to trustee Chu's question around, you know, we actually work pretty closely with Napa Valley College. I was just there meeting with the vice president of academic affairs a week ago, trying to see how can we sort of band together to make sure our students are leaving high school with some college credits and are able to, you know, make that next step in their life.
Great, thank you.
I know you're interested in how a person can get 2 years of college while they go into high school.
Of course, you know,
Yeah.
that ACHS student, very inspirational about how I think it sounded like he finished his MVC college days before finishing high school, which is, wow. I mean, that's just very inspirational. And I think Emily probably knows him.
So Emily, do you have any comments?
Well, I did also take that survey that trustee Chu was talking about. My AP literature teacher is actually on the board, I think, for NVC. She works closely with Marcus. And she was talking about how she wanted to phase out AP classes in high school and replace them with college courses so students can get guaranteed college credit. So yeah, that's about it for me. I have taken college courses. I've been dual enrolled, not currently this semester, but I do think that it gives you a great advantage. And I really enjoyed taking classes at NVC and DVC. So.
Good. Yeah. Okay. All right. So last item, we need to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Third. First by trustee Gracia, second by trustee Water. Student board rep.
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed or abstain? All right. Good night, everybody. Thank you.